I've seen and heard enough. I just want to know, why? I discovered my wife's affair through a haunting portrait. The betrayal was unbearable, but my revenge was cold and calculated. With Adrestia's help, I exposed her lies and shattered her world. The confrontation was intense. The fallout, even more so. Every secret was laid bare, every deception unmasked. This journey of deceit, revelation, and vengeance took unexpected turns. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. June 1987. My name is Joe Neely. During this story, I was a boss for a team of field service engineers, basically repairmen who fix office gadgets. I started working for the company right after I left the military in early 1984. I had just finished 4 years as a radio operator in the Marines. With my 2-year electronics degree and my honorable discharge, I set out to find a job. I got the job quickly and found out I was really good at it. I understood electronics well and could get along with the customers. I enjoyed the work. I didn't make a lot of money, but it was enough to pay the bills. I also went to night classes and eventually earned a 4-year degree in electronics. The company had clients all over Southern California, including some fancy areas like Century City. One of these clients was a law firm with many important clients, like celebrities and politicians. Wendy Patterson was a junior lawyer at this law firm in Century City. She also handled buying new equipment for the office, which meant we saw each other often. Our relationship was always professional, but I often thought about her in a dreamy way because I found her very attractive. After I became a supervisor, Wendy told me about a machine in her office that kept breaking down. I knew this machine well. It worked great when it worked, but it often had problems. She seemed very upset because her bosses weren't happy with her handling of the problem. I understood her situation. Her bosses didn't get that machines sometimes break and need to be replaced. They blamed her instead. I listened to her concerns and suggested she get a new machine. I even offered to join her and the sales rep to help decide. Her face lit up at my offer. "You'd do that for me, Joe?" she asked. I nodded. "Sure, Wendy," I said. "I'd be happy to help." She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and thanked me warmly. I told her I would talk to the sales rep that afternoon. Remember, this was 1987, and not everyone had a cell phone. After speaking with the sales rep, I called Wendy and set a meeting for the next day. We discussed several options. She listened to the rep but looked to me for advice. I liked the machine he suggested but proposed getting a slightly better one that would last longer. She liked this idea, as did the rep, since it meant a bit more commission for him. Once the paperwork was done, I even supervised the installation and showed Wendy and her co-workers how to use some of the new features. When I finished, Wendy pulled me into her office. "I can't thank you enough, Joe," she said. "I almost lost my job." She showed just how close by holding 2 fingers close together. "You saved me. There's got to be something I can do to thank you." I wanted to say something romantic, but stayed professional. "Just doing my job, Wendy," I said. "You don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do," she insisted, writing something on a piece of paper. She handed it to me. "Meet me at this address at 6 o'clock tonight. It's my treat." I recognized the address. It was an expensive steakhouse next to a nightclub. "Wendy, this is—" I began, but she cut me off. "It's the least I can do," she said. "Dress casual and bring your appetite. By the way, I hope you like to dance." "I do," I replied. She smiled. "Good," she said. "See you there." We had a great time that night and spent about an hour getting to know each other. Wendy came from a family of lawyers and followed in her father's footsteps. At the time, she wasn't seeing anyone seriously but hoped to change that. I shared my background growing up in Roswell, New Mexico, and my time in the Marines. "Were you ever in combat?" she asked. "A short trip to Beirut, yes," I said, explaining I was part of the team that relieved the unit bombed back in October 1983. After dinner, we went next door and danced the night away. I found myself liking Wendy a lot. She was very attractive and charming. I decided to take things slow and let them happen naturally. As the night ended, Wendy gave me a long, passionate kiss. There was a lot of promise in that kiss, and I hoped it would lead to more. We began dating, and a couple of weeks later we spent a night together at a motel because we were too tired to go back to either of our places. We ended up very close that night. The next morning, I woke up feeling happy. About a month later, Wendy invited me to her parents' house for Sunday dinner. They lived in a nice part of town, and I felt a bit worried about meeting them. Wendy told me they were just normal people and I had no reason to be nervous. They were polite and treated me well, but I could tell her father, Don, didn't think highly of me. I was not in the same social class as Wendy. He mentioned he always wanted her to marry another lawyer, but he said he'd accept anyone she chose. It wasn't the best feeling, but at least it was something. I told Wendy how I felt, but she just shrugged. "Do you mind that you make more money than me?" I asked. The truth is, she made much more than I did, but she never showed it off like others in her circle. "I wouldn't care if you made minimum wage," she said. "I'd rather be with a good, honest, hard-working man like you than a rich jerk who thinks money can solve everything." I admired her even more after hearing that. We kept dating and fell in love. In October 1987, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. Her mother seemed happy for us, but I wasn't sure about her father. He took me to his home office and gave me a paper. "What's this?" I asked. "It's a prenuptial agreement," he said. "Nothing personal. I just want to protect my daughter's assets. I'm sure you understand," he added in a tone that felt a bit condescending. I looked at it but couldn't understand the complicated legal language. "Don't worry, just sign it and I'll take care of the rest," he told me. I knew better than to do that, so I replied. "My dad once told me never to sign a legal document without a lawyer looking at it first," I said. "No offense, but I'd like another set of eyes on this before I sign." He shrugged. "No problem," he said. "I'm sure you'll find everything in order." Later, a lawyer I saw, Mark Hempstead, told me the document was very one-sided and could be used against me. He made changes and advised me to sign it only in front of a notary. "By the way," he said, "is Wendy Patterson a lawyer? Is her father named Don?" "Yes," I said. "How do you know that?" "Well, my son dated a Wendy Patterson in law school," he said. "They were a couple for a while, but he left and went back east. Not sure what happened, he never told me." "What's your son's name?" I asked. "Carl," he said. I remembered that and asked Wendy about it next time I saw her. "Yeah, I knew a Carl Hempstead in college," she said. "We dated for a bit, but it didn't work out. He went back east, so we ended it." "Why?" I told her I had met his father and he remembered her name. "Must have made an impression for him to remember me," she said. I kept that information in mind, just in case. Don wasn't happy about the changes to the prenup, but he agreed, and so did Wendy. Wendy told me men often pursued her for her money. I could see that, but still wondered about Don's reasons. A month later, in November, Wendy and I got married in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. We didn't want a big wedding, just family and close friends. My parents flew in from Roswell and some co-workers came too. The reception was like a pool party and we had a lot of fun. Wendy and I went to Acapulco for our honeymoon and had a great time. The next 13 months were wonderful, or so I thought. About a year after we got married, Wendy became a junior partner in her firm and started spending more time away. She had late nights, some weekends working with clients out of town, and Friday nights out with the girls to relax and chat. I didn't really like it, but I supported her as best as I could. One thing I didn't enjoy were her yearly trips to New York. The conferences usually lasted a week, but last year she stayed a few extra days to meet important clients, or at least that's what she said. Some clients of her firm were rich and powerful, so I accepted it. I trusted Wendy completely and never thought she'd cheat on me, but I missed her. Her behavior also changed a bit. She became more distant, like her father. She didn't put me down, but made some comments about her new social status. She traded her Toyota for a BMW and bought new clothes, some of which were quite fancy. Things changed in the bedroom, too. We didn't have sex as often as before, maybe twice a week on average. The rest of the time, she said she was too tired or had a headache. By the time her 1990 conference started, I was almost glad to see her go. The house felt tense. We weren't fighting, but there was a lot we didn't say to each other. I guess I should have known something was up by the way she acted. She kissed me on the cheek Friday morning before she left for work and promised to call. Monday, May 14th, 1990, ****. I got home that night, tired from work, grabbed the mail from our mailbox, and went inside for another lonely night with leftovers, beer, and TV. Wendy had been back east for her yearly conference since Friday night. She promised to call me every night, and so far she had kept that promise, though I could tell it wasn't easy for her. After a quick bite, I sorted the mail. Bills were set aside for us to review later, as we always did together. Junk mail went straight to the trash. But one letter, addressed to me by name, caught my eye. It was on fancy paper with elegant old-style writing. I almost threw it away, but decided to open it. The letter was from a place called Ramnusia Gallery and was an invitation. It said I was invited to a special private showing of a new piece of art. I found it odd because I never showed any interest in art. The letter said I needed to be there the next day, Tuesday, at 11 a.m. sharp. I checked the address in my Thomas Guide, a well-known map book for anyone living in Southern California back then. The gallery was just a few blocks from my morning appointment. That night, Wendy called and we talked for a few minutes. She told me about her conference and the interesting people she met. I told her about the invitation. "You should go," she said. "It would be good for you to see some art." "If you insist," I said. "I insist," she replied. We said our goodbyes and exchanged loving words before ending the call. I missed her so much and wondered if she really missed me just as much. The next day, I finished my service call about 20 minutes before 11 o'clock. I called in and took lunch. I headed to the Ramnusia Gallery address and was surprised to see a large, Gothic house that looked like it belonged in a movie. I checked the address, parked, and walked to the front door, which opened just as I was about to ring the bell. "Good day, Mr. Neely," said a short, neat blonde who opened the door. "You're right on time. Thank you for being punctual. Please come in." I followed her inside and looked around. The place seemed empty and was filled with old-looking chairs, tables, and matching lamps. The walls had portraits of unknown people in various poses. None of them looked happy. I wondered what kind of gallery this was. "My name is Dr. Adrestia Ramnusia," the blonde said, extending a delicate hand. I took it, curious about her and her unusual name. Living in Southern California, I was used to different names and accents, so I thought nothing more of it. "You're probably wondering what kind of gallery this is," she said, almost like she read my mind. "Let's just say there's nothing like it anywhere else," she added with a slight smile. "Let's look at your portrait, shall we?" "My portrait?" She opened a pair of double doors and led me into a room with only 2 chairs and a small table, set in front of a covered painting on an easel. She ushered me to a chair and stood by the covered portrait. Once I sat down, she smiled and removed the cover. Saying I was shocked when she uncovered the painting would be putting it mildly. The portrait looked almost like a photo, but I could see the brushstrokes. It was a painting of Wendy, sitting at a table that could have been in a restaurant or a bar. She was wearing a black dress that showed quite a bit of her chest. She seemed to be looking up at someone special with a familiar sparkle in her eyes and a loving smile. I recognized the necklace she wore. It was the one I gave her for Valentine's Day that year. But I saw something that bothered me. Her wedding and engagement rings were missing. Instead, she had a dolphin ring on her right hand, a piece of jewelry I had seen many times but never asked about. I looked at Adrestia, confused. "What's going on here?" I asked. "How did you get this?" "We received this over the weekend," she said, "and I thought you should see it yourself." A flag suddenly went up in my mind. How could she have known this was my wife and gotten the invitation to me so quickly? I set that aside for the moment. "But this is a picture of my wife," I said. "When did she pose for this? Where's her wedding ring and who is she smiling at?" "You are correct," Adrestia said. "It is a portrait of your wife. It was done late Friday night. The other questions will be answered in time, that is, if you really want the answers." "Friday night?" I asked. "But she just got into New York Friday night. I spoke to her on the phone when she got to her room." "And what time was that?" Adrestia asked. "I guess it was about 3 p.m., I said. "That would have made it about 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Wendy told me she had just gotten to her room after dinner and was going straight to bed. She sounded really tired." "Look at the watch on her arm," Adrestia said. I looked closely and saw the watch Wendy always wore. The time was hard to see, so Adrestia handed me a magnifying glass. I checked again, and it showed 9:15. How was this possible, I wondered. "But this could have happened at any time," I said. "This was done exactly when it happened," Adrestia told me. "That meant Wendy had gone out after we talked." I was shocked. Had she lied to me? Was she seeing someone else? What was going on? I'm sure you have many questions right now, Adrestia said. You should come back later tonight, around 9:30. Why? I asked. Is there more? She smiled and sat in the chair beside me. Maybe, she said, but you'll never know unless you return. She handed me a key. Come anytime you want, but I really think you should come back at 9:30 tonight. Confused, I took the key and put it in my pocket. Thanking her, I stood up. She walked me to the door and smiled as I left. Remember, she said, 9:30 tonight. I drove off in a daze. Why did Adrestia want me back at 9:30 tonight? Is Wendy cheating on me? If so, with whom? Should I tell her when she calls, or should I wait to see what is happening? I somehow made it through the rest of my day and got home after 5 o'clock. The phone rang as soon as I walked in. It was Wendy. I thought about confronting her, but decided to wait until I had more information. Hey, sweetie, she said. I miss you so much. How was your private showing? It was, eye-opening, I said. I might go back to see what else they have. Good, she said. You could use a little culture, you know. So how is your trip so far? I asked, trying to change the subject. Not too bad, she said. Mostly dry lawyer talk, you know. Meet anyone interesting? I asked. Oh, 1 or 2 people, but nothing like you, she said. Got any plans for the evening? I asked. Oh, a few of us are going to grab a bite to eat and a couple drinks, she said. We might do some dancing, but that's pretty much it. How about you? Not much, just going to eat, maybe watch a little TV, but that's all, I said. Okay, she said. Just so long as you're not out partying. Yeah, that's me, one big party animal, I said, laughing. She laughed with me. Talk to you tomorrow, she said. Love you. I love you too, I said. We ended the call, and I sat there looking at the phone, wondering if she truly meant what she said. I ate and watched a little television, but my mind was on that painting. There were too many questions and no answers. I knew it would take me about 45 minutes to get to the gallery, so I left around 8:35. I got to the gallery at 9:25 and let myself in. It was darker inside than before, and I felt like I was the only one there. It felt spooky, and I almost expected to see eyes following me. I went to the room with the portrait and opened the door. Adrestia had covered the painting after I left, so I uncovered it and got the shock of my life. The picture had changed completely. Wendy was now standing with her back to me, next to another man who had his arm around her. They were walking away, and Wendy was looking back. The look on her face was one I knew well. It looked like she wanted to be with him. I used the magnifying glass on the table to look at her watch. It showed 12 o'clock. If this was the real time, it was about 35 minutes ago. How was this possible? I wondered. I covered the portrait and sat down, putting my head in my hands. Was Wendy cheating on me? If so, why? None of this made any sense. I thought back and couldn't remember any signs that she was unfaithful. In fact, she had told me she hated cheaters. Surely this had to be a cruel joke. After sitting there for about 30 minutes, I decided to take one more look. I had to know who this guy was. I uncovered the painting again and nearly fell back into the chair. The painting had changed yet again. This time, Wendy was with the man in an intimate way. Tears fell down my cheeks as I looked at the painting. How could she do this, I wondered. Adrestia's voice cut through my thoughts. It's always shocking to learn the one you love is cheating on you, she said quietly. I didn't even know she was there. She walked to the painting and covered it back up before sitting next to me. How is this possible? I asked. Is it real? Please tell me it's not real. I'm sorry, Joe, she said, but it's very real. I shook my head. No, I said, it can't be. She'd never do something like this to me. Actually, she would, Adrestia said, and she is. I hate to tell you this, but it's not the first time, she said. I stared at her, stunned. What do you mean? This is actually the 5th time they've been together since you got married, she explained. You know about this? I asked. She nodded. Yes, I do. How? I pressed. She looked down for a second before speaking. I don't think you're ready to hear the full story yet, she said gently. Maybe after you've had a night to sleep on it, you will be. She uncovered the painting one more time, and it had changed again. This time, Wendy was lying flat on her back with the man between her legs, about to engage in a private act. I noticed her rings in an empty ashtray on the nightstand. I broke down, crying. Adrestia covered the painting and came to my side. "I'm so sorry you had to see that, Joe," she said, placing her hand on my head. She kissed my forehead and I suddenly stopped crying, the initial shock fading. "Tonight you will sleep and dream of better times. Come back tomorrow after work and I'll explain everything." I nodded, still shaky. She led me to the door and wished me good night. I drove home, feeling a storm of emotions. Part of me was sad, but another part was very angry. Strangely, I slept well that night, dreaming of Wendy and I during happier days. I got through work the next day and went straight to the gallery afterward. Adrestia met me at the door and took me to her office. The office was different from the rest of the gallery. It was filled with old books and scrolls. A computer was on her desk with another large screen on the wall. She made a cup of tea, handed it to me, and sat behind her desk as I took a sip. "I trust you slept well last night," she said as she opened a large folder. "I did, thank you," I replied. "Are you ready for the answers you need?" she asked. "Yes, I am," I said. She nodded and looked at her folder. "The man you saw with your wife was Carl Hempstead, an old boyfriend from college," she said. "I believe you've heard that name before." "I have," I said. "He works at the same firm as your wife, but in their New York office," Adrestia continued. "They spent a conference together last year, and they've met here in Los Angeles 4 times, the last time about 6 months ago. He's the man her father wanted her to marry." That made sense to me, given what Don had said back in '87. "They are planning to set you up for divorce," Adrestia said. "They want to make it look like you cheated on her so she can use the prenuptial agreement against you." "What?" I asked. "I've never cheated on Wendy. I've never even thought about it." "I know," she said. "That's why I reached out to you." "How do you know all of this?" I asked. She motioned to all the books and scrolls around her. "I know everything about every marriage," she said. "It's my job to know. I can help you if you ask for my help first. It's a rule I've followed for years. Do you want my help?" "Yes, of course," I said. "But I still don't understand how you know all of this. And why now? Why not when it first happened? I didn't reach out to you earlier because they didn't start planning to frame you until recently. Her father is also part of the plan." I looked at her, shocked. "And you know this for sure?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "Watch." She turned on the large screen on the wall. It showed 2 videos side by side. One showed Wendy in her hotel room on the phone. The other showed Don also on the phone in his home office. "Is everything set up?" Wendy asked. "Yes, it is," Don replied. "I've got someone ready to meet Joe at that bar he likes. You know the one." There was a bar I sometimes visited on Fridays after work to relax with my coworkers. We never stayed long. "Yes, I do," Wendy said. "But Joe never stays there long. He usually has just 1 beer and then leaves." "I've got that covered," Don said. "A little something in his beer and he'll be out cold. Once he's out, she'll take off his pants and take some pictures. That'll be enough. Your prenup will kick in and you'll be free." "Oh, Dad," she said. "You're so clever." He laughed. "You have no idea," he said. "I've already got the divorce papers ready. They'll be filed the same day you get the pictures of his so-called cheating. He'll have no defense and no way to prove they're fake." "What would I do without you, Dad?" she asked. "You should have listened to me and married Hempstead like I told you," he said. "Instead, you chose that repairman." "Joe's a good man," she said. "Maybe so," Don said. "But he's not good enough for you and you know it. He's just a repairman. He'll never be able to support you as you deserve." "So when is this going to happen?" she asked. "This Friday," Don said. "Tonight you tell your husband you have to stay until Monday. Tell him you have to meet clients. He'll believe you. Friday, when he goes to the bar, the girl I hired will approach him. When he's not looking, she'll slip him the drugs and it'll be done. Then you and Carl spend the weekend at our place in the Hamptons. By the time you get back Monday, we'll have him caught. You confront him with the pictures and we'll give him the papers that day." "I hate doing this to him," she said. "It has to be done, and you know it," Don said. "The sooner it's done, the better." "I guess you're right," she said. "Just don't hurt him." "Don't worry," Don said. "You just stick to the plan and I'll handle the rest." "Okay, Daddy," she said. "Talk to you soon. Bye." They both hung up, and as I watched, Wendy turned to Carl. "It's going to be done this Friday," she said. "Good," Carl said. "Then it'll just be us. I can't wait," he added, kissing her on the cheek. I'd better call Joe and let him know I won't be back till Monday, she said. He's expecting my call. Make it fast, Don said. We have reservations, you know. She nodded and placed another call. I could hear the phone ringing in the background. Then I heard our message machine pick up. Hi, baby, it's me, she said. Sorry I missed you. Some of us are getting ready to go grab something to eat. I just wanted to let you know I'll be meeting with clients this weekend, so I won't be back till Monday. Love you. Bye-bye. As I watched, she hung up the phone and smiled. The video ended, and I sat there, stunned. I looked at Adrestia. How did you do that? I asked. How did you get those cameras set up just at the right time? Trade secret, she told me. So what do we do now? I asked. Would you like to confront your wife? Tonight? She asked. Of course I would, I said. But I don't have a plane ticket to New York. That won't be a problem, she said. So how do I do this? I asked. Go home. Listen to her message to prove to yourself this is real, she said. Then be back here at 9:30. I'll take care of the rest. I agreed and went home. I had to hear that message if, in fact, there was a message to hear. Sure enough, when I got home, the machine said there was one message, so I let it play and heard the very same message I had seen her leave earlier. Damn. I was back at the gallery at 9:30, having showered and changed. Adrestia met me at the door, and we walked into the room with her portrait. I looked and saw Wendy and Carl on the bed together. I looked at Adrestia. Are you ready? She asked. I nodded my head. Yes, I said. She took my hand and looked at me before speaking. Remember, they won't be able to see or hear you at first, she said. I'll let you know when they can. I nodded my head in understanding. Get ready, she added. Soon, the room we had been in was gone and was replaced with a dark hotel room. After my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I could see Wendy and Carl in the bed. Wendy was laying on her back while Carl was over her. I could tell from the movement that they were having an intimate moment. Soon he moved away and stood at the foot of the bed. Wendy laid there, her legs spread wide. I could see what had just happened. That was great, he said. Yes, it was, wasn't it? She asked in response. Better than your husband? He asked with a smirk. Of course, she said with a little laugh. You always were better than him. You don't even need to ask. I need a cigarette after that, he said, grabbing a robe. Want to join me? Wendy got out of the bed and put on a short, silky robe. Why not? She asked. When did Wendy start smoking? I asked myself. As I watched, they opened a sliding glass door and stepped out onto a small balcony to light up. Go ahead, Adrestia whispered to me after they leaned on the balcony to smoke their cigarettes. They can see you now. I nodded my head and stepped forward. Wendy turned around and her eyes opened wide as she saw me step up to the sliding glass door. Joe, she exclaimed, what are you doing here? Carl turned around and leaned against the railing, a smirk on his face. Why, Wendy? I asked. Wasn't I good enough for you? Didn't I love you enough? Why did you feel it necessary to plot against me with your father and lover boy here? I don't know what you're talking about, Joe, she said. Bullshit, I yelled, causing her to lean back against the railing. I heard you plotting with Daddy Dearest to set me up with a hooker so you could file for divorce. Joe, it's not what you think, she started. I cut her off with a wave of my hand. I don't want to hear it, I said. I've seen and heard enough. I just want to know, why? Was all that stuff you said about not caring how much I make just a lie? How many other lies have you told me? No, it wasn't, she said tearfully. So tell me, why did you do it? I asked. She looked down, sheepish. Carl stood up, a smirk still on his face. He was a bit taller than me, but I weighed more than he did, and I had the benefit of training. Plus, I was more than just a little bit mad. Look, Jarhead, he said, you'll never be up to her standards, and you know it. You're just a repairman. You'll never be able to give Wendy what she needs. Now just go back where you came from and let a real man take care of her. You piece of shit, I said. I ought to rip your head off. Carl got angry, which is exactly what I wanted. He came at me with a wild swing, but never connected. I hit him in the throat and began punching him with my fists. Wendy started screaming at me to stop, but I was too mad. I kicked him in the groin hard. Then, as he doubled over, I gave him an uppercut to the jaw and pushed him away from me. Somehow he tripped over his own feet, and before I knew it, he had gone over the low railing on the balcony. Somewhere along the way, he reached out and grabbed Wendy, who went over with him. I couldn't get to her in time, and the last thing I saw was her face, locked in the knowledge that she was about to die. Her eyes were wide and her mouth open as she fell 20 stories to the ground below. Adrestia pulled me away from the edge, and before I knew it, we were back in her office. I was shaking. 2 people had just died, and one of them was the woman I loved so much. I didn't like what she had done, but I never wanted her to get hurt. Adrestia seemed to know this and held my face in her hands. She chanted something in a language I couldn't understand. "You should go home now," she said, handing me a tea bag. "Drink this when you get home. It will help you calm down. The police will likely come to your house in a couple of hours, and you need to be ready for them." I killed them," I said. She shook her head. "No," she said. "They did this to themselves. Their greed and selfishness led them here. Don't blame yourself. Do you understand?" I suddenly felt much calmer and nodded. "Yeah," I said. "What about her father?" She smiled. "I'll handle him," she said. "Trust me." She walked with me to the front, but we stopped in the viewing room on the way. Adrestia looked at me before lifting a cover off a picture. "This will be her final entry," Adrestia said. When I looked, I saw Wendy's face as she fell over the railing. Her eyes were wide and her mouth was open in a silent scream. It was clear she knew the end was coming. I wondered if she had any regrets. As if reading my mind, Adrestia spoke. "Your wife regretted everything at the end," Adrestia said. "But those regrets came too late. This will now be her final entry in my gallery." She took the painting off the easel and put it on the wall between 2 others. I noticed the same fear and regret in the other pictures. "Are all of these?" I began. "They were all cheaters," Adrestia said. She turned to look at me. "You should go now. Remember, Joe, I will always be with you here," she said, touching my chest. "Live, love, and be happy." "And Don?" I asked. "As I said, justice will be done," she said. "I promise." I drove home, still shocked by everything that had happened. When I got home, I made tea with the bag Adrestia gave me, and it did help calm my nerves. About 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. I answered it and found 2 uniformed police officers and a man in a wrinkled suit holding a badge. "Mr. Joe Neely?" the man asked. I nodded. "May we come in, please?" I invited them in. "Mr. Neely, I'm Detective Smith with the Los Angeles Police Department," he said. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but your wife is dead." "Dead?" I asked, trying to look surprised. "How? When?" "A couple of hours ago," he said. "It seems she fell from her hotel room in New York. The NYPD is investigating. They're not sure if she was pushed or if she jumped. Do you know a Carl Hempstead?" "No, I don't," I said. "Why?" "He died with her," Detective Smith said. "It appears they may have been involved in something together." I tried to look shocked and sad. It wasn't hard. I was still in shock over her death. "Her body will be returned after the medical examiner is done with the autopsy, Mr. Neely. If you know anything, we would appreciate any help you can give." "Thank you, Detective," I said. "All I know is that my wife was in New York for her annual conference. She called earlier to tell me she would be meeting with clients this weekend and coming home Monday." "I see," Smith said. "Again, I'm sorry for your loss," he added. "Good night, sir," he said before leaving. Wendy's death got a brief mention on the news, but there was no talk of an affair with Hempstead. Maybe, I thought, that was because of her firm's influence. Her body was returned to L.A., and her parents took care of the funeral arrangements. I had little contact with them during this time, but her friends and co-workers stopped by to offer their sympathy. Because her face and body were badly hurt, the casket was kept closed during the service, and a large picture of her was placed next to the coffin. Her mother asked if I wanted to say any last words, but I said no, and just shook my head. Don came up to me but stepped back when he saw the look on my face. After the funeral, we all went to the gravesite for the burial. After her coffin was lowered into the ground, a man in a suit approached Don. "Are you Don Patterson?" the man asked. Don said he was, looking annoyed. The man handed him a large envelope. "You've been served," the man said, walking away. Don opened the envelope and looked inside. His face went pale when he saw the divorce papers and a bunch of color photographs of him with a much younger woman. They were both wore nothing, and it seemed like Don was having a good time. He looked at his wife, who glared back at him. "Don't bother coming home," she whispered. But, he began. Standing next to him, I couldn't help but see the photos and papers. I chuckled and leaned in close to him. "Looks like that's what you had planned for me," I said quietly. He looked at me, shocked. "Guess karma's a real thing, isn't it?" I laughed as I walked away. I decided to see Adrestia to tell her what happened, but when I got there, the old Gothic house was gone. It was replaced with a nice ranch-style home. I checked the address and knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered. I'm looking for Ramnusia Gallery," I said. "I'm pretty sure this is the address." She shook her head. "I'm sorry, son," she said. "There's nothing by that name here. We've lived here for 35 years. I apologized and left, confused. As it turned out, Don's troubles were just starting, and something told me Adrestia was behind it. A few days after the funeral, I saw a news report that said Don's house had been raided. The police got a secret tip. They found many photos of young girls in bad situations in his office. So Don was charged with making child porn. His wife divorced him and took almost everything. He was sentenced to 35 years in prison and lost his law license forever. "Thank you, Adrestia," I said quietly. In my mind, I heard her say, "You're welcome." I also got a lot of money. Wendy's insurance gave me $1 million after final expenses. I also inherited a large sum of money once her estate was settled. Around this time, a friend from Spokane, Washington, called me. He said his company needed a service manager and he thought I would fit the job. I wanted to leave Southern California because I felt I had nothing left there, so I moved north and got the job right away. They gave me 2 weeks to sort my things in California. I sold my place, taking only a few items. I let Wendy's mother take what she wanted and then sold or gave the rest to Goodwill. A few months later, I met Linda at a bar in downtown Spokane. We dated for a while, fell in love, and got married. We bought a 2-story log house by Twin Lakes and raised 2 great kids who now have their own families. Everything was going well until August 2019, when Linda was told she had stomach cancer. I sat on the balcony thinking of my dear Linda, looking at that old invitation. "Where were you, Adrestia?" I wondered. "I'm always with you, Joe," I heard in my mind. "Always, and so is Linda." I smiled and nodded. Somehow I knew things would be okay. It was early afternoon when I got to our house. It was an old 2-story farmhouse in the Kansas countryside, surrounded by large fields of wheat and alfalfa. Before you ask, no, I'm not a farmer. I don't even know how to use a tractor. The fields belong to someone else, thank God. My name is Bill Jacobs. Maybe you've read my work. I'm an art critic, and my weekly articles appear in about 200 newspapers across the country and on many big websites. I work mostly from this cozy country house that my wife of 8 years and I call home. I travel a bit, maybe 1 to 3 days a week, depending on what I'm writing about. My wife, Denise, is a surgeon at the county hospital in what locals here call a town. The people here are good, honest, and hard-working. They take care of their families and do the right thing. They look you in the eye when they shake your hand. But the town is not what I'm used to after living most of my life in Southern California. I met her at an exhibit in Los Angeles. I was covering the event for the paper, and she was there on a break from her studies. She was finishing her medical degree at the time. I remember that day clearly. I was looking at a piece of art, making notes, when she came up to me. "That's an interesting piece," she said. "Think so?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "What do you think?" "To me, I've seen better work done by kids with crayons," I told her. "Don't you like abstract art?" she asked. "I do," I said. "But this isn't abstract. It's lazy work by someone who hasn't sold anything in months. They probably threw paint on a canvas, said something fancy about inner conflict, and hoped it would sell. But I wouldn't buy it." "Are you an art buyer?" she asked. "No, I'm a critic," I said. "Bill Jacobs," I said, holding out my hand. "Denise Blackman," she said, shaking my hand. "You're a real art critic?" I laughed. "Yes," I said. "They pay me real money to write bad things about art like this. Some artists even see it as an honor to be insulted by me." She laughed. "Sounds interesting," she said. I shrugged. "It can be," I said. I mostly travel to see art exhibits and maybe talk to artists, but I spend a lot of time on my computer. It can get boring. What about you? I'm a medical student, she said. I start my residency next year. Now that sounds exciting, I said. It's mostly work, she said. That's why I'm here. I needed a break from studying. I get that, I said. Now, if you want to see real art, look at that piece over there, I added, pointing to a picture of a country farmhouse covered in snow. Tell me what you think. She looked at the piece and smiled. That reminds me of where I grew up in Kansas, she said. I love how the moonlight shines on the house. Are you sure it's moonlight? I asked. Look closer. She walked to the picture and I followed her. Her face changed as she stood in front of it. It looks so different from here, she said. Yes, I said. The way the artist used the brush and mixed the colors makes it look different depending on where you stand. Look close, and you'll see details you missed before. You're right, she said. I like this. Congrats, I said. You're an art critic now. She laughed. Oh, no, she replied. I could never do what you do. I would be too scared of hurting someone's feelings. We spent the next 2 hours looking at the rest of the exhibit. I had to admit I enjoyed hearing her thoughts on different paintings. I wasn't happy when she had to leave, but I knew she needed to go back to class. Before she left, we exchanged phone numbers and email addresses. It's been nice meeting you, Bill, she said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. I'd love to do this again sometime. Me too, I told her. Over the next few months, we got to know each other better and started dating seriously. At first, I worried she might mind that I was 6 years older, but she didn't. She made me feel younger. One thing led to another, and soon we were married. I felt so lucky. Denise was, and still is, in my opinion, very warm and caring. Our life together was amazing. She never complained about my work schedule or when I had to travel for art reviews. Her work hours changed a lot since she was doing a 5-year residency. Sometimes she worked normal hours. Other times, she worked late. We talked about this at the start, and I was okay with her odd hours, even though it made it hard for us to be together in the evening or on weekends. After her residency, she got a job at a hospital in her hometown. They had just built a new surgical center, so locals didn't have to travel far for surgery. By then, I could work from anywhere because my work was online. So we packed up, sold the apartment, and moved to Kansas. We bought a 2-story farmhouse that was built in the 19th century, but had been upgraded with modern conveniences, including central air conditioning. I made sure it had high-speed internet, which was essential for my work. We turned one of the bedrooms upstairs into my office and planned to use the 3rd bedroom for a nursery. Our bedroom was large, with a nice bathroom for both of us. The biggest change for me was how dark it got at night in the countryside. It was pitch black. You couldn't even see your hand in front of your face. This was very different from the bright lights of the city. But I loved the night sky. I had never seen so many stars. I used to have a small telescope when I was a kid, but nothing prepared me for this. Seeing how much I enjoyed the stars, Denise surprised me with a nice 8-inch telescope with all the accessories for taking pictures. Naturally, I thanked her that night. It took me a while to learn how to take good pictures of the night sky. It's not as simple as pointing a camera and clicking, but I figured it out, and soon my office was filled with pictures of planets, galaxies, and colorful nebulae. Denise even took a few to decorate her office. The best times were the nights Denise and I sat out back with the telescope. After watching the stars for a while, we would often lay there, feeling like we were on top of the world. The first 7 years of our marriage were perfect, at least to me. I loved my job, had a nice home, and a beautiful wife. What more could a man want? We even talked about having kids. Denise had been on birth control because she wanted to wait until she was more settled, which I understood. Then I noticed small changes in her. Her work hours got longer and more random. She became short-tempered about small things, and we argued over silly stuff. I thought it was job stress, so I didn't say much. One year, she had to go to a medical conference in Wichita for 5 days. Before she left, she seemed worried, but wouldn't say why. I tried to be close to her the night before she left, but she said she had a headache. The next day, she left, promising to call me every night. I had an important exhibit to review in New York that week, and I saw that I could meet her in Wichita that Friday and come home with her. I hoped she'd like the surprise. The exhibit went well, and I finished my article on time. Denise called every night as promised, but I felt like she didn't really want to talk to me. I decided not to tell her about my plan for Friday, hoping we could spend the weekend there. When I got to her hotel, I looked everywhere but couldn't find her. After verifying my identity, the hotel said she hadn't checked out yet and might be in one of the conferences, so I gave her a call. "Are you all right, Bill?" she asked quietly when she answered the call. "Yes," I said. "I thought I'd surprise you by stopping by on my way back from New York. I figured we could spend the weekend here and then go home together." "Where are you? Are you in a seminar?" "Well, yes, I am," she said, sounding annoyed. I could hear someone speaking to her in the background, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. I could tell Denise covered the phone so I wouldn't hear her answer. I wondered why she did that. After a few moments, she uncovered the phone and spoke to me. "Listen, dear," she said. "It's sweet of you to surprise me, but I won't be good company right now." "Why not?" I asked. "Well, I've been invited to watch a couple of procedures at the hospital here by the head of surgery, so I'll be here for another day or so," she explained. "I didn't know about it until a few hours ago. I'm sorry. I'll be home Sunday night and we can spend time together then." "Yeah, okay," I said. "It's just that I've missed you all week." "I miss you too," she said. "Please go on home and I'll see you Sunday night, okay? Promise." "Okay," I replied. "See you then. Love you." "Love you too," she said. She didn't close the call right away, and I thought I heard her say something like, "dodged a bullet." Maybe I didn't hear her correctly, but it sounded like that. So I went back to the airport and got a flight home. I wasn't happy. For the first time in our married life, I started to wonder if she was cheating on me. Denise did get back on Sunday. Well, technically it was Monday at about 2:30 a.m. She tried to be quiet so she wouldn't wake me up, but I was already awake. She put her suitcases in the closet, then went into the bathroom. A few minutes later, she came out wearing a long robe and climbed into bed. I couldn't ignore the strong smell of cigar smoke, aftershave, and something else when she snuggled up to me. "Please go take a shower," I mumbled. "You smell like an ashtray." "I'm too tired to take a shower," she said. "Fine," I told her, getting up. "I'll sleep on the couch." I grabbed my pillow and a blanket and went downstairs. I didn't sleep well that night, only drifting off a couple of times. I got up at 8 o'clock when Denise stumbled into the kitchen to make coffee. "I thought you were coming home yesterday," I said. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping sleep from her eyes. I could still smell the cigar and aftershave, so I kept my distance. "It took longer than I planned, and it was hard to get a flight last night. Why were you so upset when I came in?" "Sorry. You know how sensitive I am to smells," I said. "I could smell cigar smoke and aftershave all over you when you came in this morning." "What were you doing, anyway?" "Dr. Branstead took a smoke break on the way to the airport," she explained. "I didn't think you would notice it on me." "And the aftershave?" I asked. "Was that his?" "Probably," she said. "You must have been very close to get it all over you like that," I said. "He gave me a hug goodbye when he dropped me off at the airport," she explained. "That must have been some hug," I said. "Look, nothing happened, all right?" she snapped. "You seem very defensive over something that never happened," I said. "I just asked a simple question." "You're right," she said. "I'm sorry, I was exhausted when I left there, and I was too tired to shower when I got home." "So, what's your schedule like?" I asked. "I don't have to be at the hospital until 11 o'clock today," she said. "I'm meeting our new head of surgery, and then I have a couple procedures this afternoon. I'll probably be late getting home." "All right," I said. "I'll order a pizza then. I'd better get to it, see what my week looks like." "Bill," Denise said as I turned to go upstairs, "I really am sorry we didn't connect this weekend." "Me too," I said with a forced smile. "Maybe next weekend." As expected, Denise didn't get home until after 8 p.m., and she was exhausted. I didn't complain too much as I knew how hard she works. I had an exhibit to review in Denver that week, so between that and her busy schedule, we saw very little of each other that week. We did manage to spend some time together over the weekend, but I sensed there was something else on Denise's mind. About a month later, Denise announced that we were invited to a social event the hospital was holding. They wanted to introduce the new regional director. So, I got my best suit cleaned and went with her to the event. Denise looked stunning in her black dress, which showed off her figure nicely. It wasn't revealing, but she still looked amazing. I was proud to be with my lovely wife at the dinner, and that's where I met the new regional director, Dr. George Branstead. He came up to us when we arrived. I noticed he was a bit older than me, with a full head of dark hair showing some gray at the temples. He looked fit, about 3 inches taller than me, and about 20 pounds heavier, mostly muscle. I recognized the aftershave he wore and the slight scent of cigar smoke around him. "This must be the famous art critic Bill Jacobs," he said, offering his hand. "I've heard a lot about you," he added as we shook hands. "In fact, I have you to thank for keeping me from making a bad decision." "How's that?" I asked. "Well, that article you wrote about the exhibit in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago," he said. "My wife and I were thinking about getting a couple new pieces of art shown there, but after your review, we changed our minds." "Glad to be of service," I said. "I take it you already know my wife from that conference in Wichita." "Yes," he said. "That's quite a lady you've got there," he remarked. I saw them exchanging looks and wondered if something else was happening. "Yes, she is," I replied. "She's an excellent surgeon," he added. "I have big plans for her, and I think she's ready for the challenge," he said, looking at her. I saw her cheeks turn red and wondered what had embarrassed her. The evening went well. Dinner was nice, and we heard several important people talk about Dr. Branstead, how great he was and all he did for the community. Then we were free to enjoy the open bar and the dance floor. Denise and I danced several times, and she also danced with Dr. Branstead. While they danced, I thought they were a bit too close. I saw him whisper to Denise more than once, making her laugh. Sometimes she glanced my way after he spoke, and I wondered what they were talking about. He brought her back to me with a showy gesture. "I think the good doctor should have the last dance with his wife," he said with a grin. I thanked him and took Denise's hand. As we danced, I noticed the smell of cigar and aftershave on her. I wondered if this was how she got his smell on her in Wichita. Finally, the dance ended and we left. I saw Branstead leaving alone and wondered where his wife was. We drove home. "I noticed George was alone tonight," I said. "Where was his wife?" "He said she wasn't feeling well," Denise replied. "You two seem to get along well," I said. "Should I be worried?" "Of course not," she said. "You're the one I love." "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "And you're the one I love. So what are these big plans he mentioned?" "They're talking about having surgeons travel to different hospitals," she said. "I'm on the list." "I see," I said. It sounded like he had something else in mind. "I don't know what that could be," she said. I had never caught her lying before, but something didn't feel right. I decided to drop the subject until I knew more. Things were tense for the next few months. Denise's schedule was worse than before. She was on a team that traveled to clinics and hospitals around the state. We hardly saw each other, and when we did, it was just to say hello and goodbye. Frustrated, I tried to get her to change her schedule so we could spend time together, but she seemed more focused on her career. Something felt off about all of this. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but decided against it. If she was innocent, she would be very angry about me spying on her. Also, I didn't want to spend money and find out nothing was wrong. Luckily, I had friends who were investigative reporters, and Denise didn't know this, so I reached out to a few to see what they could find out about Dr. Branstead. I was in Seattle reviewing an exhibit when I got a call from Denise. She said she would be in Topeka for a meeting that weekend. I was very frustrated but tried to stay calm. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know we planned to get away when you got back from Seattle. I'll make it up to you." I had heard this too many times before. I counted to 10 before responding. "Bill?" she asked when I didn't reply. "Are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "Who's going to this meeting?" "Well, Dr. Branstead," she said. "Of course," I thought. "And some others from my hospital and other hospitals." "Okay," I said. "Do what you have to do. I'm not happy, but I understand." "You're the best," she said. "I love you." "Love you too," I said before ending the call. This had to stop, I thought. I finished the exhibit and went to the hotel. While eating, my phone rang again. It was Ralph Williams, a friend who works for the Kansas City Star. "Hello," I said. "Hey, Bill," he said. "How's it going?" "Yup," I said, making him laugh. "That good, huh?" he asked sarcastically. "Pretty much," I said. "Did you find anything?" "I sure did," he said. "Your Dr. George Branstead is quite a guy." Is that good or bad? I asked. Well, Ralph said, he's very rich, married to a wife who can't stand him, knows everyone, and has a reputation as a cheater. He loves married women, by the way. Unfortunately, I get it, I said. The rumor is he's seeing a cute blonde surgeon from the middle of the state, he said, making my heart sink. Do you have a name? I asked. No, but I can tell you she's a real Kansas farm girl. Cute as a button from the photos I saw. Photos? I asked. You have photos? Yes, he said. They were at a healthcare event a few weeks ago. Looked very friendly. Can you email me those photos? I asked. Sure, he said. Happy to. Thanks, Ralph. I appreciate it, I said. Anytime, old friend, he said. By the way, it turns out the good doctor got involved in a scandal out west a few years back. What kind of scandal? I asked. The kind that makes famous doctors leave quietly, if you catch my drift, he said. I don't know everything, but I know someone who does. I'll send you her info along with some pictures. She writes for a gossip blog in California. She's waiting for your call. Thanks, I said and hung up. I remember Denise saying she had a meeting in Kansas City a month ago, but she never told me about George. Then my phone dinged. It was an email. I was nervous, but I opened it to see the photos. And there it was. Denise, sitting in a hotel restaurant with George Branstad. One photo showed them kissing, and another showed them holding hands. This was no business meeting. It felt like a punch in the gut. How long had this been going on? Was she in love with him? How could she betray us? My mind was racing. I had one more call to make, so I dialed the number Ralph gave me. Linda Carson? She said when she picked up. I introduced myself and mentioned Ralph had suggested I call her. Yes, she said. I've been expecting your call. You want to know about George Branstad? Yeah, I said. What can you tell me? Well, he was caught with a student in his office about 8 or 9 years ago, she said. He got fired, and now he's in Kansas. Do you know the name of the student? I asked. Yes, I do, she said. It never made it into my report, though. The school wanted to keep her name out. Let me check my notes. Ah, here it is, Denise Blackman. I felt sick. Are you sure? I asked. Absolutely, she said. Do you know her? That's my wife's maiden name, I said. When did this happen? I'm sorry to hear that, she said. Hold on, let me check. Here it is, she said, giving me the date. I checked my old planner. It was the day I met her at the exhibit. Damn. I thanked Linda and ended the call. Somehow I got through dinner, then went to my room to finish my article for the week. I submitted it just in time and decided to go home. I needed answers, but none came. I hoped things would get better. I got home early Friday afternoon, grabbed the mail, and went inside. The place felt unusually quiet. I put away my clothes and sorted the mail. Bills went in one pile and junk mail went in the trash. There was a beige envelope addressed to me in fancy writing from some place called Ramnusia Gallery. I opened it. It was an invitation to an exclusive showing at 5 p.m. that evening. The address was local. I had never heard of the gallery before. Maybe it was new, and the owner wanted to show me around. I decided to go and take my mind off things for a while. I arrived at a large, 2-story Victorian house at 5 o'clock. The door opened before I could knock. A slim, petite blonde, looking no older than 25, stood there. Mr. Jacobs, she said, right on time. Please come in. I followed her inside. After she closed the door, she turned to me. My name is Adrestia Ramnusia. Welcome to my gallery, she said, offering her hand. Pleasure to meet you. I didn't know there was an art gallery in this town, I said. She smiled and pushed a strand of hair out of her face. Trust me, Mr. Jacobs, she said. There's nothing like it anywhere else in the world. Please call me Bill, I said. All right, Bill, she said. And you can call me Adrestia or Dr. A. Adrestia, I said. That's an interesting name. I've been called many things over the years, she said. Feel free to look around. I walked through the gallery, looking at the portraits on the walls. They seemed almost like photos and showed people facing their last moments. It was the strangest collection I had ever seen. I looked for the artist's name but couldn't read the markings in the corners. I stopped at a portrait of a woman falling backward. Her eyes were wide open, her hair flew in her face, and her mouth was open in a silent scream. She seemed to know her end was near. This is a strange collection, I said. Do you sell many of these? These aren't for sale, she said. They're kept for the future. This one is one of our newest additions. They look so real, I said. Who painted these? Some of them painted themselves, she said. I looked at her, stunned. How was that possible? So if these portraits aren't for sale, how do you stay open? I asked. Money isn't a problem, she said. We have very, very deep pockets. After a few awkward moments, she spoke again. Oh, I see. You thought I invited you here to write a review. Isn't that why you sent the invitation? I asked. She smiled and shook her head. No, it's not, she said. I'm sorry if you misunderstood. Actually, I have something here just for you. Please come with me. I followed her through a set of double doors into a room. There was a covered picture on an easel and 2 chairs with a small table between them. Please have a seat, she told me, pointing to the chair on the right side. I sat down and watched as she went to the picture and took off the cover. I was shocked. In the picture was Denise, wearing a black dress that showed a lot of skin. Her hair was nicely done and her nails were painted red. I noticed she wasn't wearing her rings on her left hand. Her hand was on top of another hand which belonged to, yes, you guessed it, George Branstad. She smiled at George with a look that said, I want you. It was a look I had seen many times since we met. I sat back in the chair, stunned. But this was a painting, not a photo. How could it be done so quickly, I wondered. Is this real? Is this some kind of a bad joke? I asked, upset by the picture. No, it's not. You're probably wondering if this is really happening, Adrestia said, as if reading my mind. Trust me, it is real. I can't explain it in a way that would make sense to you, but I assure you it's real. She covered the picture and sat in the chair next to me. I know this is a terrible shock to you, she said. I nodded, feeling numb. Yes, I stammered. I also know you've suspected your wife has been cheating for a while, but you have no proof, she said. How would you know that? I asked. It's my job to know, she told me. Who is this woman, I wondered. She smiled, like she could read my thoughts. Please come back at 11 p.m. tonight, she said. Your questions will be answered. Numb, I got out of the chair and let her lead me to the front door. Remember, she said, 11 p.m. tonight. I nodded and left after she closed the door. I went home, ate, and tried to not think about Denise, but it was impossible. I thought about drinking a beer, but decided I wanted to be clear-headed when I went back to the gallery, so I watched some TV and tried to take a short nap. I finally dozed off, waking up just in time to brush my teeth and get to the gallery. The door opened just as I was about to knock, and Adrestia waved me in. I followed her to the private viewing room. After I sat down, she uncovered the picture again. I was shocked to see Denise wear nothing with George Branstad. What kind of trickery is this? I looked at Adrestia, confused. Please come into my office, she said. I got up and followed her upstairs. I looked around when we entered her office. There were shelves filled with what looked like old books and scrolls. A computer sat on her desk and another large screen was on the wall. She made a cup of tea, handed it to me, and sat behind her desk. I took a sip and felt a bit better. What's going on? I asked. How could that picture have changed? Maybe this will help, she said. After moving her mouse, the screen on the wall turned on. I could see Denise in bed with George. How could this be real? I had seen enough. I saw her phone on the nightstand and called her. I could see her phone light up as the call went through. She picked it up, looked at it for a moment, then declined the call and put it back. Who was that? George asked. Him, she said. Probably just got back from Seattle. Denise was clearly annoyed. I called her phone again, interrupting them. Denise grabbed the phone, declined it, and tossed it back on the nightstand, extending her finger in frustration. What did you do that for? George asked. Because he's pissing me off, she said. Enough, I thought. I was about to search for their hotel number when Adrestia handed me a piece of paper. Here's the number to their hotel, she said. They're in room 625 as Dr. and Mrs. George Branstad. Angry, I thanked her and called the hotel. When I got the receptionist, I asked for room 625. I heard the room phone ring in the video and saw George pick up the receiver. Hello, he said. Put my wife on the phone right now, I growled. As I watched, he looked at the receiver and slowly handed it to her. It's for you, he said quietly. Denise took the receiver and answered. I could tell she wasn't happy, but I didn't care. "Hello," she said quietly. "Well, hello there, Mrs. Branstead," I said. I saw her face go pale in the video. "Having a good time, I see." "Bill," she said, "there's nothing going on. Why are you so upset?" "Why are you with Branstead?" I asked. "Why did you register as Mrs. Branstead?" "Did you end our marriage without telling me?" I asked. "Bill, nothing happened," she replied. "Liar," I said, my voice harsh. She flinched when I said that. I had never used strong language with her before, and it shocked her. "I just saw you two together. Did you really think you could have his baby and expect me to raise it? Are you crazy?" "You saw us?" Denise asked, looking around for a camera. "Yes, I saw and I heard everything," I said. "How long has this been going on? I know you and him were close in college, and you were caught the day we met, so why—" "Bill, you're mistaken," she said. "This was the first time. Let me come home and we can talk about it. It doesn't have to change anything." "There's nothing for you to come home to," I said. "You might as well stay with him. I'm seeing a lawyer on Monday. You'll get divorce papers." "I don't want a divorce," she begged. "Please, don't do this. I love you." "Yeah, right," I said. "Don't bother coming back. I don't ever want to see you again." I ended the call and watched as she handed the phone back to George, tears running down her face. "I have to go," she said, scrambling for her clothes. "I have to fix this with Bill." "Why?" George asked. "I could hear him on the phone. He's divorcing you. You're free." She shook her head. "I have to make this right," she said as she got dressed. George got out of bed. "I'll drive you," he said. "You're too upset to drive, and who knows what he might do." "Bill would never hurt me," she said. "Normally, probably not," he replied. "But he just caught you cheating. Who knows what he'll do? Does he have a gun?" She shook her head. "No," she said. "Still, I'm driving you home, and that's final," he said. As we watched, they got dressed, then packed up and left. I noticed her rings were still on the nightstand. I looked at Adrestia before speaking. "How did you get that camera in their room?" I asked. "That's a secret," she said. "Did you mean it when you said you never want to see her again?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. She closed her eyes for a moment. "All right," she said. "Why don't you go home and try to rest?" "Maybe I should," I said. She held my head and I felt a warm feeling spread through me. "Things will get better," she said. "Trust me." Strangely enough, I did. I left her office and went home. Denise was right. I didn't have a gun, but I did have a strong baseball bat. I laid down on the couch and placed the bat on the floor next to me. I woke up to loud knocking on the door. I rubbed my eyes and looked at the clock, 6:30 a.m. I thought it might be Denise and her lover, but was surprised to see a state trooper on my porch. "Mr. Jacobs?" he asked. "William Jacobs?" "Yeah, I'm Bill Jacobs," I told him. "I'm sorry to inform you, sir, but your wife is dead," he said. "Dead?" I asked. "How? When?" "She was in a car with Dr. George Branstead when a sudden tornado hit their car on the highway," he said. "The tornado lifted the car and slammed it down about a half-mile away. No one survived. I'm sorry, sir. Her body has been taken to the county morgue." "Thank you," I said, feeling numb. I wondered if Adrestia had something to do with that, then dismissed the idea. How could she create a tornado in the middle of nowhere? I showered, dressed, and went to the county morgue to identify her. While there, I spoke with the trooper who reported it. "Strangest thing I've ever seen," he said. "The sky was clear. Tornado just appeared out of nowhere, picked up the car like it was nothing, slammed it down, then disappeared. Whole thing lasted just a few seconds. Sorry for your loss." I nodded. "Thanks," I said. My next stop was the gallery. As before, Adrestia opened the door before I could knock. "Please come into the viewing room," she said. We went inside and she uncovered the portrait. There was Denise's face, her eyes wide open, her mouth in a silent scream. I could see the seat she was in and a swirling cloud outside the window next to her. I watched as Adrestia picked up the portrait and hung it in her gallery. Tears ran down my face as I realized what kind of gallery this was. Adrestia looked at me. "It really does get easier," she said. She held my head again, and suddenly I didn't feel like mourning. She smiled and kissed my forehead. "Go now," she said. "Live, love, and enjoy life. You'll find someone better. Trust me." I nodded and left the gallery. Denise's funeral was crowded. She had many friends at the hospital, and most of them attended, along with her parents, who were shocked by her death. I accepted the condolences, but strangely, I felt no need to mourn. I also didn't tell anyone about her cheating. After the funeral, I drove to the gallery, but was shocked to see the building was gone. I parked and looked at the lot, now covered with weeds. I checked the address and looked around, but saw no one. Was it all a dream? I wondered. No, I heard Adrestia's voice in my head. It was real, she said in my mind. I nodded and went back home. Epilogue. For some reason, I chose to keep the house. The countryside was peaceful, and I loved the night sky. I cleared out Denise's belongings, giving them to her family. They were good people, and we still got along. About 6 months later, I was in the living room when someone knocked on the door. I opened it to find a pretty woman with brown hair wearing a t-shirt and shorts. Yes, I asked. Can I help you? Mr. Jacobs? She asked. I nodded. Yes, that's me, I said. I'm Kirsten Smith, she said. I used to be Kirsten Branstead. Please come in, I said. How can I help you? I just wanted to thank you, she said. For what? I asked. My husband died in the car with your wife, she said. I had nothing to do with that tornado, I said. Why are you thanking me? I know you didn't cause the tornado. I wanted to meet you ever since you reviewed my picture at that exhibit in Los Angeles, she said. The one with the country house. I remembered then. She lifted a box and handed it to me. I took it and invited her inside. Please sit, I told her. Would you like something to drink? A Coke, maybe. Coke would be nice, she said. I brought her a Coke and opened the box. Inside was the picture I reviewed the day I met Denise. Does it look familiar? She asked. Yes, it's the picture I reviewed years ago, I said. Look closer, she said. I did, and it hit me. It looked like my house. Is this? I began. She smiled. I used this house as the model, she said, and I want you to have it. That's very kind, I said. But why? It's strange, she said. Everyone told me I wouldn't make it as an artist, even George, but your review was different. You said I had talent. I framed that review and put it up next to the picture. After George died, I kept hearing a voice in my head telling me to give it to you. It even came in my dreams, so I finally packed it up and brought it. That's very nice of you, I said. I'll definitely hang it up. What are you doing now? Not much, she said. I don't need to work anymore now that George's money is mine, and I'm thinking of painting again. I nodded. Do you have a place to work? I asked. Not yet, she said. Well, I have space in the building out back, I said. It has electricity. I can set it up for you. You do that? She asked, surprised. Why not? I said. I'm not using it. Might as well put it to good use. She hugged me and thanked me many times. I showed her the space. This would be perfect, she said. I'll need to add heat and air conditioning, I said. It gets very hot in summer and cold in winter, but I think it will work for you. I'll pay you rent, she said. I shook my head. Don't worry about it, I said. If you watch the place while I'm gone, that's enough. Kirsten almost lived in the workspace I set up for her. It felt good knowing someone was around when I was away. We got to know each other well, and she had free run of the place. After a few months, she was mostly living in the house, and yes, in my bed. A few months later, we got married. On our wedding night, I thought back to the last thing Adrestia said to me. You'll find someone much better. Trust me. What's that old saying? When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. As I parked in front of the building where my wife Kelly and I lived, I wondered about our marriage. Was it falling apart, or was I imagining it? I got out of the car and grabbed the mail. More bills and junk, mostly addressed to occupant. I was tired, as usual. That's what happens when you work 16 hours a day, 4 days a week, and another day at a fast food place nearby. The reason I worked so much was simple. We had bills to pay and wanted to save for a house. Plus, I wanted to do something special for Kelly on our 5th anniversary, which was in a few days. Kelly helped too. She kept the place in order and worked at a travel agency. She didn't make much money, but it helped. As for me, I worked 40 hours a week for a customer service company, which meant being on the phone all day, either listening to complaints or taking orders. It could get old. But the money wasn't bad, and we had great benefits. I made $18 an hour, plus commission checks every month and bonus checks every 6 months based on company performance. Most of the time, my commission checks were almost as much as my regular pay. On top of that, I worked part-time at the fast food place, taking orders and money. It sounded boring and sometimes was, but it was different from my main job. I had been working like this for almost 2 years and it was wearing me down. On the bright side, I had managed to get our money problem sorted out and had even saved a lot for a house. Between the 2 jobs, I was making over $7,000 a month before taxes. I planned to quit the second job once we were in a better financial place. After the cruise, I wanted to take a close look at our finances. Because of my busy schedule, Kelly had been handling the bills for the past year, and she seemed to be doing fine with it. Through her work, Kelly got us tickets for a 5-day Caribbean cruise at a big discount. I decided to spend extra money for a suite with a balcony and a nice ocean view. I was really looking forward to spending time alone with her on the water. We had both arranged to take vacation at the same time, and we were set to leave after work tomorrow, which was Friday. I climbed the stairs to our apartment and opened the door. It was dark inside, and all I could hear was the cuckoo clock on the wall. Weird, I thought. Kelly didn't mention not being home. I put the mail on the table by the door and turned on the light. The place was clean and neat, as always, but something felt off. "Kelly, I'm home," I called out. Silence. I walked into the kitchen but didn't see any food prepared. She usually left a covered plate in the fridge for me when I got home late, but there was nothing. I went to the bedroom and saw the bed was made, but no sign of Kelly. I pulled out my phone and tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. "Kelly, this is Sam," I said. "That's me, by the way. Sam Carmichael." "Where are you? I'm at the apartment. Please call me." I hung up and sent her a text. "Where are you?" No response. I went to the closet and noticed some of her clothes were missing. Where did she go? I wondered. Did she leave me? I opened her dresser drawers and saw some of her stuff was missing. I went into the bathroom and saw that most of her toiletries were gone. Then I spotted it, an envelope sitting on the bathroom counter between the 2 sinks, with my name written on it in her handwriting. Nervously, I grabbed the envelope and opened it. I went to the front room, sat down, and read her letter. "Sam," it began. Not "Dear Sam," just Sam. This wasn't looking good. I kept reading. "I know this will be hard for you to understand, and I know you'll be very angry with me. Please let me explain. I've been seeing someone else for the past few months. I'm with him now, and I'm going to spend the next week with him on the cruise you and I planned for our anniversary. I know we talked about having children, but the truth is, I don't want to have children with you. I know you're a hard worker and a good provider, and you'll make a wonderful father to someone else's children. Just so you know, I've stopped using birth control for the past 3 weeks because my new partner asked me to. That's one reason we haven't been intimate for the last month. I wanted to make sure he was the one to get me pregnant. I know this sounds cold, and I'm sorry. You'd really like him, Sam. He's a good guy, in many ways. He's also better in bed and knows how to please me. It's not that you don't please me, you do sometimes. But he knows how to make me happy just by talking to me, and he makes me feel special. I enjoy being with him more than I ever did with you. I know I've never done some things with you, but with him, everything feels different. His name is Jake, and he works at the agency with me. And yes, everyone there knows about our relationship, and they think it's great that he and I are going away for a while. They also agree that you would be a terrific dad to Jake's children. I know you're wondering if I've fallen in love with him, and the answer is yes. It's not that I don't love you. I do, but it's more like how a sister loves a brother, or how close friends love each other. Truth is, Sam, since I met Jake, I don't love you the way a wife should love her husband. Not anymore. I'm sorry if this hurts you, but it's the truth. That doesn't mean I want a divorce. I don't. Like I said, you're a hard worker and a good provider. Jake agrees that it would be best if we stayed married. That way our combined insurances can cover my pregnancies and you can help raise his children. He admits he probably wouldn't be a very good dad. There's also going to be a few changes when we get back. I'll be spending some nights at his place and he'll be spending some nights here. When he's here, you can either sleep on the couch or go somewhere else for the night. Maybe you can get a third job so you'll be out making money while Jake and I are together. That will be a big help when the children start to come. And just so you know, Sam, I won't be intimate with you anymore. Jake says he refuses to share, and frankly, I'm just not interested in being with you that way anymore. Maybe after a while I'll let you help clean up after us, and don't even think about finding another girlfriend. That would be unacceptable. I know you're probably very angry right now and thinking about divorce. Jake says that if you do, I'll make things really hard for you in court. I'll get your retirement along with half of your paycheck. He also says you'll have to pay me child support as well, so forget about a divorce. I know this hurts, but a part of me is hurting as well. So Jake and I are taking the tickets you paid for and going on the cruise. Don't bother trying to call or text me because I've already blocked your number. I'll send you some pictures or videos to show you what you're missing and to let you know I'm safe. I need to go now. The taxi is here and I'm meeting Jake at the airport. We're leaving a day early so we won't be so tired when the ship leaves. I'll call or text when we're back so you can pick me up. Again, I'm sorry, but this is how it will be from now on. Your friend, Kelly. I sat there, stunned, as the letter fell from my hand. Friend? What did she mean by that? With a friend, like Kelly, who needed enemies. Sure, things had been weird lately, but I thought it was just because of my busy schedule. That's why I paid for that cruise. The more I thought about the letter, the angrier I got. I pulled the ring off my finger and threw it across the room. To hell with her and her stupid ideas. If she thought I would just sit here and take this, she was out of her mind. I looked at the clock. 3 a.m. I had to be at work in 5 hours and knew I would get very little sleep. I thought about sleeping in the bed, but all I could think of was her with this Jake guy, whoever he was. I grabbed a pillow and a blanket and laid down on the couch. I fell asleep because I was too exhausted to stay awake. The next day, I woke up wondering why I was on the couch. Then I remembered what happened the night before. I looked at my phone, hoping for a message saying it was all a joke, but there was nothing. I dragged myself into the bathroom, took a shower, dressed, then grabbed a quick cup of coffee for the road. I tried to put my personal problems aside while I worked, but it was hard listening to people complain about their issues. I did what I could, but it seemed others noticed something was wrong. After lunch, my boss, Wanda, called me into her office. I knew there was an issue when she asked me to close the door. "Is everything okay, Sam?" she asked, genuinely concerned. "You seemed off this morning. Everything okay at home? I know you're working 2 jobs. Maybe you should consider quitting the fast food place." I thought about it for a moment before responding. "No, Wanda, everything's not okay at home," I said. She had always been honest with me, and I felt she had a right to know what was going on. "Can you tell me about it?" she asked. I reached in my pocket and pulled out the letter Kelly left for me last night. "I came home to this last night," I said, handing her the letter. She took it, opened it, and read what Kelly wrote. When she finished, she handed it back to me, shaking her head. "Look, Sam, we need you to be fully focused here," she said. "I've heard from some of the others that you've been short-tempered all morning. After reading that, I understand why. Look, you were scheduled to be on vacation next week, so why don't you take the rest of the day off? I'll give you extra time off. You deserve it. And here, let me give you a referral," she added, writing something on a piece of paper. When she finished, she handed it to me. "That's the name and number of the lawyer I used in my divorce," she said. "I've been where you are now. Well, maybe not exactly, but close enough. Give her a call, tell her I recommended her." "Thanks, Wanda," I said. "I appreciate that." "No problem, Sam," she said. "Take the next week, get things straightened out, and come back focused, okay? And remember, there are plenty of fish in the sea." I chuckled at that. "I hear you, Wanda," I said. "Thanks again." She dismissed me, so I went to my desk and shut down, telling my coworker I'd see him in a week or so. He waved as I left. When I got to my car, I pulled out the note Wanda gave me and called the number. "Law offices of Hawkins and Bledsoe. How can I direct your call?" the receptionist said when she answered. "I'd like to speak with Linda Hawkins, please," I said. "Wanda Green gave me her number and recommended her to me." "One moment, sir," the receptionist said. I was put on hold and listened to the hold music as I waited. A couple of minutes later, the receptionist came back on the line. "Sir, Miss Hawkins is scheduled to be in court this afternoon, but she does have a slot open at 4 p.m., she said. "Will that work for you?" "That will be perfect," I said. "I'll be there. Where are you located?" She gave me the address, and I wrote it down on a piece of paper. She took my name and confirmed the appointment. I thanked her and ended the call. I looked at the time and realized I had enough time to head over to the travel agency where Kelly worked. Maybe I could catch her in time to stop this craziness. I also wanted something else, my money back. I got to the agency, parked the car, and went inside. There were 4 other women in the main office, and they all looked up when I came in. The looks they gave me indicated they knew what was going on. I went to the front desk, where Julie, the receptionist, sat. I had met them all before at gatherings with Kelly. "Hello, Sam," Julie said. "I'm here to see Kelly," I said. She looked around before answering. "She's not here today," Julie told me. She opened a desk drawer, pulled out a large envelope, and handed it to me. "She told us you knew and asked that I give you this if you came in." There were smirks on the faces of the other women, and I wondered how much they knew. I opened the envelope and immediately smelled something strange. I looked inside and saw a pair of Kelly's underwear folded up inside. They were soaking wet with something. I refused to touch them, and as I shook the envelope, I noticed something else. I picked up a long pencil from Julie's desk and used it to move the wet cloth to get a better look. Kelly had hidden her rings in the crotch of the panties, and they were covered with a sticky white substance that I knew must be from Jake. There was also a USB drive at the bottom of the envelope. Feeling sick, I looked at Julie, who was smirking. I saw that all the other women were smirking too. "Do you think this is funny?" I asked. Julie looked away, embarrassed. "What's on the thumb drive?" "We had a farewell party for her and Jake yesterday afternoon," Julie said. "It has some pictures and videos she thought you'd like to see." An older woman came into the front office from the back and leaned against the wall, watching me. "She's not here, Sam," the older woman said. "She and Jake have already left, and yes, we all knew about them." "And you approved of it?" I asked. She shrugged. "What do you want, Sam?" she asked. "I want my money back," I said. "I paid for that cruise. I don't have the tickets, so I want my money back." "I can't do that, Sam," she said. "Those tickets were non-refundable, but I do think it was nice of you to let Kelly put one in Jake's name." "I did no such thing," I told her. "I worked so hard to pay for those tickets. I don't have them. What Kelly did was fraud, and you went along with it. I want my money back right now." "Sorry, Sam," she said. "That's not going to happen." "Then we'll see what the court says," I told her. "I'll be suing this agency and every single one of you over this." I turned to walk out, but Julie stopped me. "What do you want?" I asked. "Sam, I'm sorry about this," she said. "Kelly was so excited about the cruise, and she made us believe that you approved of what she was doing. Just let her have this, okay? There will be other cruises." "Are you married?" I asked her. She shook her head. "No, I'm not," she said. "Then you have no idea what it's like to be betrayed by someone who claims to love you," I said. "Maybe one day you'll come home to find your partner gone. There will be no cruises with them and no more anniversaries. If you hear from her, tell her I never want to see her face again as long as I live. You tell her that, you hear me?" "Sam, you can't mean that," she said. "I do mean it," I said. "Tell her I hope she and Jake get what they deserve." Julie looked at me, shocked. The others looked shocked as well. I looked around the office before speaking again. "I guess I'll see you all in court. Goodbye." I turned and left before anyone could say anything else. I still had a couple of hours before I had to be at Linda's office, so I pulled into a park, found a shady spot, and took a nap in my car after setting the alarm on my phone. Is there no justice in the world? I asked myself as I leaned back. The nap helped, but not much. My neck was stiff and sore when I woke up. I took a sip of lukewarm coffee and started the car. When I got to the building where Linda's office was, I checked myself in the mirror. I looked awful. I combed my hair as best I could, grabbed Kelly's letter and the envelope Julie gave me, and headed inside. When I got to the office, a pretty blonde receptionist took my name and asked me to wait. She offered me a cup of fresh coffee, which I accepted. A few minutes later, she came out and walked me to Linda's office, closing the door after I was inside. Linda Hawkins was older than me, but still quite attractive. She stood up and offered her hand, which I shook. "It's good to meet you, Mr. Carmichael," she said. "Please have a seat." "Thank you, Miss Hawkins," I said, sitting down. "Please call me Sam." "I will, Sam," she said with a slight smile. "And feel free to call me Linda. What can we do for you today?" "I'd like to see about getting a divorce," I told her. "And why would you want to do that, Sam?" she asked. "My wife is cheating on me, and there's more," I said, handing her the letter Kelly left me. Linda took the letter from me and read it, frowning as she did so. When she finished, she handed it back to me. "And what's in the envelope?" she asked. I handed it to her. Kelly left it for me. She had one of her colleagues give it to me. "Be careful opening it," I said. "It's pretty gross." She opened the envelope, and her face scrunched up from the smell. She closed it quickly and handed it back to me. "I don't blame you for wanting a divorce," she said. "What are you looking to get out of it?" "Basically everything," I said. "To tell you the truth, I want her to pay for what she did. Not only is she cheating on me, but she and the agency she works for also cheated me out of more than $2,000. "I see," she said. "Sam, what do you know about the divorce laws in this state?" "I don't know anything about them," I said. "That's why I came to you. My boss recommended you." "Well, I'm glad she did," Linda said. "Let me be blunt, Sam. The family court system isn't about justice. It doesn't really matter who did what to whom, at least not in this state. It's all about money. Do you have any children?" "No," I said. She nodded. "That's actually a good thing," she said. "Divorce is always hardest on the children. What about property? Do you own a house?" "No, we're renting a one-bedroom apartment," I said. "I've been working extra to help save up for a down payment." "I see," she said. "So that's one less thing we have to deal with. And you say she works?" "Yes," I said. "She works for AA Travel Agency." "And how much does she make?" Linda asked. "About the same as my base pay, about $18 an hour," I told her. "Okay," Linda said. "Well, the court might tell you to give her some money for a couple of years unless she remarries, and you'll probably have to split all your stuff, including any retirement savings, but it seems pretty simple." "What about her cheating?" I asked. "This is a no-fault state," she said. "We can't even mention that in the paperwork, but we might use it in our talks. Have you thought about counseling?" "No," I said. "I can't get past this, and counseling won't help." "The court might still order it," she said. "It's not uncommon." "What about her saying she'll bring her lover to the apartment?" I asked. "Can she do that?" "Is her name on the lease?" Linda asked. "Yes," I replied. "Well, unless she or her boyfriend threaten you with harm, there's nothing you can do. She lives there too," Linda said. "This is awful," I said, shaking my head. "Yes, divorce is awful," Linda said. "It's the price you pay for how it started." I laughed a little at that. "Look, Sam, maybe she'll change her mind by the time she returns. She might realize she made a mistake and want to try again. I've helped a lot of people through divorces, and it's never easy. Maybe you should think about a legal separation to cool down. Later, if you still want a divorce, we can go ahead. I'd also suggest quitting the second job. The more money you make, the more she'll want. Besides, you seem exhausted." "What's the point?" I said. "Okay, what about getting my money back for the cruise?" "We can work on that," she said. We discussed the details, and Linda wrote notes. When we were done, she gave me a checklist of things to do, mostly about the bank. I shook her hand and left, stopping at the front desk to leave a payment on my way out. I still felt terrible about everything, but at least I was doing something. I thought about quitting the second job. It was wearing me out, so I decided to talk to my manager tomorrow and give my notice. On the way home, I stopped at the bank and made the changes Linda suggested. I paid off and canceled the credit card Kelly and I shared. Then I took half of the money from our joint accounts and put it into a separate account I already had for bonuses and commissions. Kelly didn't have access to that account, so I thought it would be safe. I had planned to use that money for a house, but those plans were over. I got home, grabbed the mail, and ate some leftover meatloaf Kelly had made a few days earlier. She often cooked big meals and froze what we didn't eat. It took a while to thaw, but that was fine by me. I sat down with my dinner and looked through the mail. It was mostly junk and ads addressed to occupant or resident, except for one piece that looked like a personal handwritten invitation with fancy writing, addressed to me from something called Ramnusia Gallery. I almost threw it away, but felt like I should open it. It was an invite to a private art show. I wasn't sure if Kelly had signed me up for it. She always tried to get me interested in the arts, but I never had time with my work schedule. The invitation said I should be there at 9:30 a.m. sharp. As I looked at it, I felt like this was something I needed to do. Don't ask me to explain why. I put the invite on the fridge with a magnet and decided to go. If nothing else, it might take my mind off my problems. I put on some gloves and opened the envelope Julie had given me earlier. After getting past the smell, I pulled out the panties and saw a ring sitting in the wettest part. I put them in a plastic bag and sealed it. Then I took out the USB drive and wiped it with alcohol. I wasn't sure if it would help, but it couldn't hurt. I took out my laptop and inserted the drive. I had a bad feeling about what was on it. And I was right. There was a folder full of pictures. Kelly with a man I assumed was Jake, drinking with friends and having fun. I noticed her skirt was so short you could almost see everything. Jake's hands were all over her in the photos, and the other girls were smiling. Some photos showed her pulling her top down or lifting her skirt to show off her tiny panties, the same ones in the envelope Julie gave me. As I looked, I saw more. Kelly topless, then naked. Finally, Kelly and Jake together in ways I didn't need to see. More photos showed Jake with her while the other girls, even their supervisor, watched. The next-to-last photo showed her straddling a toilet bowl naked as two girls held her panties underneath. One of them was Julie. In the middle of the panties were her rings, the ones I had put on her finger nearly 5 years ago. I saw something that made my heart sink. There was a stream of urine soaking the underwear and the gold rings. The last photo showed Kelly, wear nothing, sitting over the toilet with the wet panties and rings under her. She looked right into the camera and waved with a big smile. The others around her were also smiling and waving. I felt beyond humiliated. Then a new feeling took over, hatred. At that moment, I hated her with everything I had. I left that folder and opened another one. I found several video files. I didn't really want to watch her with that guy, but I wanted to hear what they were saying. I clicked on the last video to find out why she was peeing on her rings. When the video started, I saw her getting ready over the toilet as the others brought her the panties. Kelly took off her rings and gave them to an older woman who carefully placed them on the underwear so they wouldn't fall into the toilet. "Ready now?" Jake asked. "Yeah," Kelly said. "I need to pee so bad." She looked into the camera. "This is what I really think of you and our marriage, Sam. Enjoy. I've wanted to do this for a while." As I watched, she peed on the rings. The others laughed and clapped as she did it. When she finished, Jake walked up to her. He started to masturbate, but she took over and began to stroke him. He moaned in pleasure. "Oh yeah, that feels good," he said. "I'm about to come." She aimed him at the rings and stroked him faster. "Do it," she said. "I want to see you cover those rings." A few moments later, he ejaculated on the rings. Everyone clapped as it happened. When he was done, she let go of him and kissed him. "All right, get the envelope," Kelly said. One of the girls brought in an envelope, and they carefully put the wet panties and rings inside. "Make sure to include the photos and video," she instructed. "If Sam comes by tomorrow, give that to him, okay, Julie?" "Sure, Kelly," Julie said. "I'll be happy to." "All right," Kelly said. "Give Sam one last wave." "Bye, Sam. Hope you have a good weekend," she said while waving. The others waved with her. After that, Jake turned to the camera. "Don't worry, Sam," he said. "I'll make sure she has a good time while we're gone. Maybe she'll even get pregnant, giving you a baby to take care of. And thanks for paying for everything," he added with a sneer. The video ended, and I felt sick. Normally, I'm not a violent man, but at that moment, I wanted to hurt them all. I put my head in my hands. I was too angry to cry. All I wanted to do was lash out. I couldn't understand why she did this to me. I never cheated on her or hurt her. I worked hard for us to have a good life. If she had told me I worked too much, I would have made changes. But she didn't. I had an idea and went to the company's website. It was part of a big organization with offices across the country. I found email addresses for the CEO and chairman of the board. I wrote an email threatening a lawsuit and attached the video, then sent it. I saw our pictures around the room, on tables and walls. I lost it and tore them all down, ripping her face out of each one. I was looking for something else to destroy when the doorbell rang. Who could that be, I wondered. I looked through the peephole and saw Julie with another woman from Kelly's office. I couldn't remember her name. I opened the door. "What do you want?" I snapped. They jumped back, shocked by my anger. "Can we talk, Sam, please?" Julie begged. "Why? Haven't you done enough? What makes you think I want to hear anything you have to say?" "Can we at least come inside?" she asked. I thought it over and decided to record the conversation. I pulled out my phone and started recording, then let them in. I sat on the couch and looked at them standing there. "Well?" I asked. "What's so important?" "Can we have something to drink, please?" Julie asked. "No," I said. "You won't be here that long. Say what you came to say and get out." They looked at each other before Julie spoke. "I talked with Kelly earlier," she said. "I told her what you said. She's very upset." "Like I care," I said. "What else?" "She wants to know if there's anything she can do to make this up to you." I laughed out loud. "Yeah, there's something she can do," I said. "She can jump off a cliff for all I care." They looked shocked. "You can't mean that," Julie said. "She's your wife." I handed her Kelly's letter. "Read that," I said. I watched her eyes widen as she read it. "I'm sorry, Sam," she finally said, handing the letter back. "Yeah, you are," I said. "You all are. You knew what Kelly was doing and you cheered her on. I saw the video." "You all thought that was pretty funny, huh?" They all looked a bit embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Sam," she said. "Kelly made us think you were okay with what she and Jake were doing." "No, she was wrong," I said. "I think it's best if you both leave." They turned to go, but Julie paused at the door and looked back. "Maybe I can help you get through this, Sam," she said. I shook my head. Yes, she was pretty, but I couldn't trust her. I also didn't want to give Kelly any reason to sue me back. "Maybe you should leave and never come back," I said softly. They left, and I locked the door behind them. After a while, I decided to drink away my problems. I drove to the corner store and bought a 6-pack of beer and some cigarettes. I had quit drinking and smoking when we got married, but now I didn't care. When I got back home, I sat on the balcony. I drank the beer and smoked several cigarettes before going to bed. The next day, I got up, took a shower, and brushed the taste of beer and cigarettes out of my mouth. I got dressed and headed out. I looked up directions to the art gallery online and saw I had just enough time to get there by 9:30. I made a cup of coffee to take with me and left. I arrived at the Victorian house from the invitation and was surprised to see no other cars. I thought more people would be invited to this event. I got out and walked to the door. Just as I was about to knock, it opened. A small, blonde woman who looked to be in her early 20s greeted me. "Good morning, Mr. Carmichael," she said with a smile. "You're right on time. Please come in. I'm Dr. Adrestia Ramnusia," she added, offering her hand. I shook it. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Am I the only one coming?" "Yes, you are," she said, as she led me to a room with a covered painting on an easel. 2 chairs were in front of it, with a small table between them. "Please have a seat," she said, pointing to the chair on the right. I sat down and watched as she uncovered the painting. "This might surprise you," she warned. I nodded. "Okay," I said, curious. She lifted the cover, revealing a painting of Kelly lying on a bed with another man between her legs. I closed my eyes. "Cover it up," I said. "Please, cover it back up." "I'm sorry," she said, placing the cover back over the painting. "How did you get this?" I asked. "Did Kelly set this up? Is this some kind of trick?" I am not amused. "No, Kelly didn't set this up," she said. "I know this is a shock. Let's go to my office and I'll explain." I followed her upstairs to an office full of old books and scrolls. A large monitor was on one wall. She pointed to a chair in front of a cluttered desk. "Please sit while I make some tea," she said quietly. "Tea? How would tea help?" I sat down, still in shock, as she poured a cup of tea. She handed it to me and waited for me to drink. Surprisingly, I started to feel a bit better after a few sips. She smiled and sat at her desk. "Can you explain what's going on?" I asked. She nodded. "Of course, Sam," she said. "It's okay if I call you Sam, right?" "Yes," I said. "All right, I help people like you get justice. I've been watching your wife for a while and decided to step in after she wrote that letter to you," she said. "You didn't know any of this was happening, did you?" "No, I didn't," I said. "How did you know about the letter? Were you spying on us? Are you a private investigator?" "I'm not a private investigator," she said. "I monitor marriages. It's my job and has been for many years. Let me show you something. Please, watch the monitor." I looked at the screen, and it showed a video of my apartment. I saw Kelly writing the letter at the kitchen table. Below the video, there was a box with words scrolling through it. Her thoughts as she wrote. She paused to write another paragraph. Below, more words appeared in the box. I have to stop him from filing for divorce, the word said. How can I put this? I know he won't accept what I'm doing, and I can't tell him I'll countersue for cruelty or abuse. That's the plan, but I can't tell him that. No, I'll use what Jake suggested. What are those words below the video? I asked. Those are her thoughts as she wrote the letter, Adrestia said. Her thoughts? How is that possible? It just is, she said. It's our special method. The bottom line is if you file for divorce, she'll counter, claiming you abused her. But that's a lie, I said. I've never done that. I know, she said, but the court here will likely believe her over you, and she knows it. My lawyer didn't mention this, I said. I know, she said. The lawyers and the system are the only true winners in divorce cases. If you want justice or fairness, you won't find it there. Kelly also told Jake that's what she planned to do. Watch. Asterisk, asterisk. As I watched the screen, the scene changed. I saw Kelly and Jake sitting close together on a plane. So, did you leave that letter for your husband? Jake asked Kelly. Yeah, I did, she replied. He's going to be so mad when he reads it, Jake told her. I know, she said. I don't really care. What will you do when he files for divorce? He asked. You know he will. That's easy, she said. I'll tell my lawyer to say he hurt me. I didn't put that in the letter to Sam, but the court will believe me. Jake laughed. Remind me not to make you angry, he said. She laughed and playfully hit his arm. You know it, she said. The video stopped. I was in shock. That's all a lie, I said. How can she do that and get away with it? People do it all the time, Adrestia said. I don't understand, I said. Why would she do this? I've never cheated on her. I've always taken care of everything. I've worked so hard to get us ahead. Why? Who knows why people do what they do, she said. Maybe you were working too much and not spending enough time with her. It's no excuse, but it happens. She could have told me, I said. I would have stopped working so much if I knew this would happen. Maybe, she said, but that's no guarantee it wouldn't have happened anyway. So what should I do? I asked. If you want, I can help you get some justice, she said. Are you up for that? Of course, I said. But how? You had a good idea last night, she said with a sly smile. What do you mean? I asked. She smiled that sly smile again, then got up and came around to me. She took my hand and made me stand. You know their ship sailed early this morning, right? She asked. I nodded. Yes, I know, I said. I paid for that cruise, remember? That's right, she said. Maybe we should visit them. I looked at her, shocked. How could we do that, I wondered. She smiled and took my hand. The next thing I knew, we were on the deck of a big cruise ship. I looked around and saw only a few people, but I did see Kelly and Jake by the railing. She wore a small bikini, and Jake wore swim trunks. They were hugging, and she was stroking his chest. I coughed to get their attention. Sam? Kelly asked when she saw me. How did you get here? And who is that woman with you? Who are you calling a woman? Adrestia asked, her face red. I'm Justice, and I'm here to make sure you pay for what you did to your husband. Kelly and Jake laughed. And what will you do? Jake asked in a threatening voice. They started walking toward us, but they slipped on something, lost their balance, and tumbled over the railing. I ran to the railing, and Adrestia joined me. We looked over the edge, and Adrestia held me back. At first, I didn't understand why. Just as they fell about 15 feet down, a huge shark emerged from the water, its mouth wide open, filled with large, jagged teeth. The mouth had to be at least 30 feet wide. I had never been so scared. As I looked, Kelly screamed loudly, her eyes wide with fear. Suddenly, both she and Jake were in the shark's mouth. The monster shut its mouth, sending up a spray of blood. Then it silently slid back under the water. I heard screams from the deck and looked to see other passengers throwing up. Some had phones out, probably taking video. Adrestia pulled me back and I heard alarms going off. Crew members rushed to the railing to see if they could help, but it was too late. Adrestia grabbed my hand, and the next thing I knew, we were back in her office. I felt sick to my stomach, but she quickly took my head in her hands and the nausea passed almost immediately. Did that really happen? I asked, shocked. Adrestia sat me back in the chair and poured another cup of tea. Yes, it happened, she said, handing me the tea. Drink this. It'll help. I took a sip of the tea and felt much better. I was still trying to process what I had just experienced, but the shock was no longer there. I noticed something else. I felt no guilt at all. No sadness, nothing. I felt nothing for what happened to Kelly and Jake. I looked at Adrestia, hoping for answers. "The tea I gave you will help you deal with the situation," she said. She was right. By the time I finished the tea, I felt much better about the whole thing. Oddly enough, I didn't even feel any sadness over Kelly's death. Shouldn't I feel something? I asked myself. After all, I was married to her, and there was a time I loved her very much. "Don't worry about not feeling anything over her death," Adrestia said, as if reading my mind. "That's a side effect of the tea I gave you. It numbs any negative emotions you might have." "I know this will sound strange, but where is Kelly now?" I asked. "I know she's dead, but—" "I know what you mean," she said. "You were raised in a religious home and were taught to believe that people either go to heaven or hell when they die. Come, let me show you." I followed her back to the room where she first showed the portrait. She took the cover off the painting, and I saw it had changed. A lot. The portrait now showed her face frozen in fear, her eyes wide, her mouth open in an eternal scream. Behind her face was the shark's mouth with rows of sharp teeth waiting. Adrestia pointed to the painting. "This is where she is now," she said, "forever stuck in her last moment. She'll spend eternity here, always regretting what she did to you. I guess you could say she's in a hell of her own making." As I watched, she took the painting off the easel and hung it on a blank spot on the wall. I looked around and saw many portraits like this one. Men and women, all caught in their final moments, forever regretting their choices. "And all these people," I began. "We're cheaters," she said, finishing my sentence. "Each and every one. They'll all spend eternity regretting it. For me, this is justice. It's who I am and what I do. And believe me, these walls aren't even half full." "How long have you been doing this?" I asked. "Longer than you can imagine, Sam," she said sadly. She took my head in her hands and looked at me closely. For a moment, I thought I saw a tear in her eye. "The next few days will be tough, but remember, Sam, I will always be with you. No matter how old you get, I will be here in your heart. Go now, live long and find new love. Trust me, she's out there, waiting for you." She kissed my cheek and I felt content. I can't explain it even now. She walked me to the door and closed it after I left. Shaken, I drove to my second job and quit. The manager wasn't too upset, but he understood and wished me well. We left on good terms, and he said he would mail my final check. I drove home, grabbed a beer, and sat in front of the TV for a while. I found it strange that I still didn't feel bad over Kelly's death. I turned on the TV and saw that the shark incident was already on the news. Several people had recorded what happened. As I flipped through the channels, I saw programs discussing if such a large shark could exist. All the reports said they were still waiting to identify the victims. Going online, I saw that the shark video had gone viral on social media. It was everywhere. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I couldn't watch the video, so I turned off my computer. I grabbed trash bags and went through the apartment collecting all of Kelly's things. Soon, I had everything packed up in her car. I called her mother and told her she needed to come get it. "Why, Sam?" she asked. I told her about Kelly's cheating, but didn't mention her getting eaten by a giant shark. She was understandably upset and said she and Kelly's father would come by later that day to pick it all up. They came by that afternoon and asked me to make up with her. I made it clear that it was impossible. I still didn't tell them about her getting eaten. I figured they'd learn soon enough. After they left, I dressed and went to a bar and grill where I ate a juicy burger and had several beers. I got through the rest of the weekend somehow and woke up late Monday since I was technically on vacation. I sat in front of the TV with a bowl of cereal as a news report came on saying the offices of AA Travel Agency had been destroyed by fire. According to the report, everyone got out okay, but just barely. An hour later, I got a call from Julie, who was very shaken. "Sam," she cried, "did you hear about the office? It burned down. We're lucky to be alive." "That's what I heard," I said. "And before you ask, no, I didn't do it." "I know," she said. "It was the strangest thing. Kelly's desk lit up and exploded, and the whole place was on fire within minutes. We barely got out alive. No one knows how it happened." "By the way, have you heard from Kelly?" "No," I said. And I don't care if I ever do. Why? Have you heard from her? I got a strange text from her just before the fire, she said. I wondered how that was possible. Yeah? I asked. What did it say? It didn't make any sense, just something about sharks and the hounds of hell, Julie said. Any idea what that's about? I smiled to myself. Nope, I said. No idea at all. We ended the call and I sat back, smiling. I drove to see Adrestia and ask her about the fire, but the Victorian mansion with her gallery was gone. I sat there and looked at the empty lot, wondering what happened. After a while, I shook my head and drove home. Epilogue. It took a couple of weeks, but I eventually heard from the cruise line. They told me about Kelly's death and sent a check that covered the ticket price and the accidental death policy. I contacted Linda and told her the separation was no longer needed. She offered her condolences, but they didn't mean much to me. A couple of weeks later, I heard from the travel agency headquarters. They offered me a large sum of money to stay silent and not sue. They also told me that everyone in the office where Kelly worked had been fired and a new team was being chosen for their new office. I thought about their offer and decided to accept it. Kelly's parents held a memorial service for their daughter, but I chose not to attend. I didn't even send flowers. They weren't happy, but said they understood how I felt. Life went on, but it took a long time before I started dating again. Since I didn't have to work the second job anymore, I started going to the gym to get back in shape. I felt good about myself, and women at work started asking me out. I went on a few dates but didn't rush into a new relationship. It took me a couple of years to trust someone completely again. Eventually, I met Marcy, a coworker who had left her husband. We've been dating for a while, and I'm thinking about proposing to her. Life is looking up. Adrestia moved on to her next case. One day, she sat at her desk and took a deep breath. She saw all the pain and cries for help she had handled. Suddenly, she felt overwhelmed. She put her head in her hands and cried, something she hadn't done in 2,000 years. In case you haven't noticed, February is the worst. It's cold, snowy, and just plain awful. If I could get rid of 1 month each year, it would be February. But wishes don't change reality. I had planned to take my wife Linda out for Valentine's Day, but a big snowstorm shut down the town, so we stayed home with the kids. We watched Frozen again. The kids had fun, and Linda and I enjoyed some time together. Later that month, Linda and I were resting on the sofa after getting Emma and Timmy to bed. Her phone rang, and I grumbled. "It's Dee. I need to take this," she said. We had a group of friends we hung out with. We all had strong views on loyalty in marriage. When we went out, we could dance with each other's spouses and feel safe. We were closest to Dee and her husband, Dave. Linda made a quick gesture that she would keep the call short. Linda's excitement grew as she talked to Dee. When she finished, she dropped onto my lap, smiling. "So, what's up?" I asked, matching her smile. "My dear husband," she said playfully, "I know you think February has been awful." "You got that right," I said, reaching for my wine. Linda caught my hand and placed it on her waist. "Dee had a great idea," Linda said. "Since this is the worst February ever, and it has an extra day, why not make something fun out of it? The extra day is a Friday. We could get sitters for the kids, have a nice dinner, dance at a good club, and stay at a hotel. It could end this terrible month on a high note." The idea sounded good, but I had a few questions. "How do we get from the club back to the hotel without driving?" I asked. "I'm usually the one who thinks of what might go wrong." "That's the best part," Linda said excitedly. "Remember the Madison Uptown? There's a dance club nearby that Dave's coworkers go to. They have a live band on Friday, and no cover if you eat at the Madison. Phil and Jane have already asked Mrs. Porter to watch their kids, and she can take ours too." I'll think about it," I said, pretending to be serious. I actually liked the idea, but wanted Linda to persuade me. Instead, she hit me with a sofa pillow. "Ow! Okay, let's do this. But I have one condition," I said. "What's that?" Linda asked, suspiciously. "Wear the dress you bought for Valentine's Day that I haven't seen yet," I said. "As you wish, my lord," she replied with a smile. The dress was blue. I can't describe the exact shade, but it made her blue eyes look stunning. It had long sleeves, a high neck, and the skirt went below her knees, but it was still beautiful. 2 days before our big night, I came home from work and sorted through the mail. There were bills, junk mail, and ads. But one large envelope caught my eye. It was addressed to us by name, Jim and Linda Carlisle, in very fancy handwriting. It was from something called Rhamnusia Gallery. I almost threw it away, but something told me to open it. The letter inside invited us to a private exhibit at the gallery the next evening at 6 p.m. No dress code was mentioned. At first, I thought it was a scam for a timeshare or something. I looked around and saw that nothing seemed like a sales pitch. There was no request for money either. I showed it to Linda. "Have you heard of this place before?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, never," she said. "Are you sure this isn't some trick? Maybe they're trying to get us to donate money or something." "I checked and no, there's nothing like that," I replied. "No donations or anything else." "Well," Linda said, shrugging, "maybe it's real. What's the harm? If we don't like it, we can always leave. I'll call Mrs. Porter and see if she can watch the kids till we get back. You can drive me to work and pick me up later, then we'll go." Linda called Mrs. Porter, who kindly agreed to watch the kids, so it was all set. The next day, we left a bit early. I dropped Linda off and went to work. After work, I picked her up and we headed to the address on the invitation. We arrived at the gallery, which was a big Victorian-style house, at least 100 years old. We walked up to the front door. It opened as soon as we stepped on the porch. A young, attractive blonde woman stood there. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Carlisle," she said. "I'm Dr. Adrestia Rhamnusia, and this is my gallery. Please come in." Linda and I exchanged a look and then stepped inside. The walls were covered with portraits. They all showed people in different stages of distress. "What kind of gallery is this?" I asked. "It's very special, Jim," the blonde said. "There's nothing like it in the world. May I call you Jim?" "Of course," I said. "Thank you," she said. "Please call me Adrestia or Dr. A. Most people find that easier." "So, you're really a doctor?" Linda asked. "Yes," she replied. "I have degrees in many fields." I wondered how she could be so accomplished given her youth. "Age doesn't always show achievements, Jim," she said, seeming to read my mind. "Trust me, I'm much older than I look," she added with a smile. She led us to large double doors and opened them. Inside, we saw a covered portrait on a stand near two antique chairs with a small table between them. "Please have a seat," Dr. A said, pointing to the chairs. We sat, and she stood next to the portrait. "What you are about to see may surprise and perhaps shock you," she said. "But don't worry, I will explain." With that, she uncovered the portrait. To say we were shocked would be too mild. The portrait showed Linda in a blue dress, the one she had never worn, holding hands with another man. I knew him right away. Marc Lavaliere, the star tight end for the Sharks, our local football team. The look she gave him was full of admiration, the same look she usually gave me. It was a look that said he was the most important person in her world. Behind her, another man, me, stood in the clothes I planned to wear for our date. My expression was one of shock. I couldn't decide which was worse, the way Linda looked at Lavaliere in the portrait or the shock on my face. Linda and I exchanged a look, and my face burned with embarrassment. "Please, don't be embarrassed," Dr. A said. "I know you have many questions. I'm ready to answer them, but you might not like what I have to say." "How did you get this portrait?" I asked. "My wife has never worn that dress, and she's never been with that man." Dr. A nodded. "I know," she said. "Please come to my office and I'll explain." We followed her upstairs to a small office crammed with books and scrolls. She invited us to sit in two chairs in front of her desk and walked to a cabinet behind it. "Would you like some tea?" she asked. "It's a special blend." "Yes, please," Linda said nervously. Dr. A smiled and poured 2 cups of tea, handing them to us. We sipped it and found it refreshing. Smiling, Adrestia sat down. "Please open your minds and let me explain before you ask questions," she said. "What you saw is a glimpse of your near future, maybe 24 to 30 hours ahead. It will be an important moment in your relationship. It will happen no matter what. How you deal with it is what matters." "Wait," I said. "Are you saying that what we saw in that portrait is going to happen tomorrow?" "Yes," she replied. "What if we decide not to go out tomorrow night as planned?" I asked. "Then you will just be delaying the inevitable," Dr. A said. "It will happen." "Why are you showing us this?" Linda asked. "Who exactly are you?" Dr. A smiled. "I have been called many names over time," she said. Nemesis and Tyre are just a couple. Others might call me less polite names, especially those who have faced my kind of justice. Let me explain. Normally, I don't get involved unless I'm asked. By then, the bad thing has happened, and my job is to deliver justice. My husband suggested I take a different approach this time, a more active one. Is that your husband? Linda asked, pointing to a small photo on her desk. In the picture, Dr. A was with a smiling man wearing a hat. Dr. A smiled and picked up the photo. Yes, that's him, she said. His name is Max. He's more than my husband. He's my close friend and someone I trust. He's the one who suggested I be more active in this matter. She set the photo back on the desk and looked at the couple sitting across from her. You see, we've been watching Mr. Lavalier for quite some time, Dr. A explained. I don't know if you know this, but he's known for going after married women. Linda looked at me, shocked. Adrestia continued. About a month ago, he targeted another young woman, a nurse married to a self-employed man, she said. He wanted to get close to her, but they managed to keep him away. The husband showed him what might happen if he didn't stop. Lavalier wisely backed off, and we thought he had learned. But we kept watching him. You've been watching him? I asked. Adrestia nodded. Yes, she said. Let me show you something. She turned to her computer and started a big screen on the wall. Watch the screen. As we watched, we saw Lavalier talking with a couple of his friends. So, Mark, you going out with us tomorrow night? One of the men asked. Hell yeah, Lavalier said. It's been a long time since I've had a good time. What, that girl you were with the other day wasn't good enough? The other friend asked, making them all laugh. She was all right, I guess, Lavalier said. But there's nothing like finding a married woman, especially when she's out with her husband. Weren't you in trouble the last time you tried that? The first friend asked. Lavalier shrugged. Yeah, a little, he said. But what are the chances the next husband will be some kind of fighter? Give me a break. Most of these guys are weak. None of them will come after me. If they do, I'll just fight them and take their wife anyway. They all laughed at that. A real gentleman, I thought sarcastically. Linda and I looked at each other, shocked. This wasn't the Mark Lavalier we had heard about in the news. According to the reports, he was a respected man involved in many activities and charities. Most people saw him as a hero. What we heard was very different. Not exactly the Mark Lavalier you've heard about, right? Dr. A asked. No, not at all, Linda said. So when did this happen? I asked. This is happening now, Adrestia said. You're having him watched? I asked. Dr. A chuckled. Not exactly, she said. I'll just say it's part of my job. So what happens next, after what you showed us? I asked. Well, that's where things get a bit tricky, Adrestia said. I can show you the past and what's happening now. The future is different. Yes, I can see a few hours ahead, but there are many possible endings. It's really up to you. I can show you some possible futures. Are you interested? Yes, Linda and I said at the same time. All right, follow me, Adrestia said, standing up. We got up and followed her out the door and up some stairs. When we reached the third floor, we saw a hallway with 4 small rooms on each side. This is a new part of the gallery, Dr. A said. I call it the Hall of Possibilities. Each room shows a possible future, depending on your choices. Remember, these are just possibilities. Nothing is set in stone. All you have to do is step into the room, and you will see the scenario play out. You won't be able to interact with anyone, and no one will interact with you. You might feel a bit dizzy, so keep one hand on the side rail. When you have seen enough, step back. Any questions? No, I said. Very well, she said. I'll watch your progress and come get you when you're done. She went into another room and closed the door. Linda and I looked at each other, shrugged as if to say, what the heck, and walked to the room marked 1. You ready for this? I asked. No, but we have to do it, she said. Remember, it's not real. I know, but I'm still nervous, I said. Me too, she said. Here we go. We held hands, grabbed the side rail, and stepped into the first room. The glass in front of us and on each side shimmered before showing us the inside of a club. It was like watching a movie with virtual reality glasses. I felt like we were really there. I saw people walking around, drinking, and talking as if we were there. I looked to my side and saw Linda doing the same as me. I looked back at the scene in front of us and saw 9 people at a table. Linda in her blue dress and the other 4 couples, including Dee and her husband Dave. Apparently I was either getting something from the bar or in the men's room. I saw Dave ask Linda in the movie to dance and heard what she said. "I'd love to, Dave, but I want tonight to be special for Jim and me. I'm only dancing with him tonight," she said. Was I proud? Happy? Absolutely. I handed out the wings and whispered to Linda. "So, is it time to leave yet?" I asked. "Right after you brought more wings? What are you thinking?" "We need our energy for my plans," she said, raising an eyebrow. She held my hand under the table. A few moments later, the band took a break. In the quieter room, we heard loud laughter from another table, and we turned to look. "Hey, isn't that Mark Lavaliere?" Phil asked, leaning around me. It is, Dee squealed with excitement. Mark Lavaliere was a famous football player for the Sharks, our city's pro team. Unlike others on the team, he lived here all year. He was known for being a really nice guy and did a lot for the community. Mark became the main topic at our table as the guys talked about his football skills and the women praised his good deeds. "It doesn't hurt that he's handsome either," Dee added. Linda and I knew who he was, but we were more interested in each other. We held hands under the table, ignoring the conversation. "Hey, you two, get a room," Dee said. Linda and I looked at each other. We hadn't even been kissing. Feeding her wings didn't count. Besides, we'd already booked a room. We were saved from more teasing when the band started again. "Shall we dance here or upstairs?" I whispered to Linda. Before she could reply, Jane interrupted. "Look, he's coming this way!" she exclaimed. Sure enough, Lavaliere was heading for our table. The women at our table got very excited, trying to look their best. Linda looked down and squeezed my hand tighter. "Hi, I'm Mark. Would you like to dance?" he asked, standing behind Linda. I felt her drop my hand in surprise. She turned away from me, took Mark's hand, and stood up without even looking back at me. Her hand looked tiny in his big one. Her face lit up with joy, and it was like I didn't exist to her anymore. "Hey, man, now my feelings are hurt. I thought she was just dancing with you tonight," Dave teased me. "Yeah, that's what I thought too," I muttered. "Relax, Jim. It's just a dance," Jane tried to calm me. I tried to believe her, but I had a bad feeling. The band played a couple of fast songs, and everyone watched them dance. Mark was really good, much better than me, and Linda was clearly having a great time. They looked perfect together, and people couldn't take their eyes off them. "Don't they look great together? Come on, Jim, let's join them," Dee suggested, trying to distract me. "Thanks, but no," I said quickly. The next song was a slow one. I watched Linda melt into his arms, fitting perfectly. Mark whispered something to her, and she smiled sweetly in response. He wasn't doing anything wrong, but I still didn't like it. Another slow song, a ballad. Mark smiled as he held her. He was pleased with how things were going. I had seen enough and wanted to stop it. I stood up, but Jane grabbed my arm. "Wait, Jim. Let her have this. Don't ruin it for her," she said. I pulled my arm away, but then saw Linda's face. She looked like she wanted to be exactly where she was. It was clear I was not on her mind. I sat back down, feeling heartbroken. Finally, the song ended. Mark nodded at the band leader, who started a faster song. He and Linda left the dance floor, smiling at each other, but not touching. Linda gave him a bright smile as she returned to our table, and he went back to his. The difference between a woman's best smile and her second-best smile is small. If you don't know her well, you wouldn't notice. As Linda neared the table, her best smile changed to her second-best when she saw me. "I keep telling you that you're the most attractive woman here," I whispered to her as I seated her. I held her hand. "Is it time to take the next dance back to our room?" For a moment I thought Linda was afraid. Her eyes widened and her hand shook. She recovered quickly and looked away. "I'm sorry, everyone. I just have to go to the restroom right now." "Linda, come with me?" Dee asked loudly. I was too distracted to wonder why she had to announce it to everyone. Linda looked at me apologetically. "Sorry, Jim. I could use a break too," she said, sounding a bit sad. She got up and left without answering my question. The group immediately started talking about why women can't go to the restroom alone. I started wondering why my friends were keeping the talk going until Dee came back, alone. "Where's Linda? Is she okay?" I asked, almost yelling. "Relax, Jim," Dee said with a smile. "Linda is fine. She just had something to do." You don't need to worry about her. She's a grown woman. What did that mean, I wondered. Sure, I worried about Linda, but she worried about me too. After about 5 minutes, with no sign of Linda, I had enough. I went to the bar using an empty plate as an excuse and spoke to one of the bartenders. Excuse me, but my wife went to the restroom 15 minutes ago and hasn't come back, I said. She never takes this long. Could you please check on her? The bartender gave me a doubtful look. Then I got an idea. The wings were spicy, and she likes spicy food, but sometimes she has a reaction. Really, I just want to make sure she's okay. Her name is Linda. Here, let me show you a picture, I said. I put the plate down and showed Linda's picture on my phone. The bartender started to look more concerned when Dee suddenly appeared next to me. She's fine, you don't need to check on her, Dee said in an almost sorry tone. Then she turned to the bartender. Everything's fine, I'll handle this, she said, putting a $5 bill on the counter. The bartender gave me a strange, sympathetic look as she pocketed the money. What? Why? But she went there with you, right? I was completely lost. Jim, she's not in the restroom. She left the club, Dee said. It felt like a punch to my stomach. Left? Without me? Why? What's wrong? Why didn't she tell me? Where did she go? Is she safe? I asked. I still didn't get it. Let's go somewhere quiet, Dee said. She led me to a dark corner at the end of the bar. It was quieter there. She looked me in the eye. Jim, Linda loves you. She loves you and the kids more than anything. But she's spending tonight with Mark, she said. I stood there, shocked, as my world fell apart. Images of Linda in her blue dress, at dinner, at the club, and with Mark flashed in my mind. My anger grew. Just then, Linda joined me. She looked pale while I felt hot with shame. She shook her head. Jim, this isn't real, she said. I would never hurt you like that. Someone thinks you would, I said. I saw your look in that scenario. It was the same as in the portrait. But, sweetheart, this isn't real, she said. Let's go back and see what else is going on, okay? Please? I glanced at the glass in the alcove before nodding. We stepped back in. It seemed the scenario had kept going even without us. Jim, Linda loves you. It's just one night, one experience. Think about all the years and the love you two have. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I know she'll come home to you, and in time, you'll be fine, Dee said gently but firmly. It took everything in me not to grab her and shake her for what she was saying. She must be out of her mind. So if Mark had picked you, you would have done the same? I asked. Yes, I would, she said, throwing the words at me. Does Dave know? I asked. No, and he doesn't need to. It won't happen, she said softly. Maybe I should tell him, I said. Jim, please don't. I know you're hurting, but that won't help. Come back to the table. Let us distract you for a while. You haven't danced with me all night, she said with a smile. I wanted to dance with my wife, but thanks to Mark and her, that's not going to happen. And now I can't spend the night with her either, I said. I turned away from her and walked back to the table. The talk stopped as soon as I got to the table. From the looks on their faces, it was clear they knew. My so-called friends knew my wife and Mark were together right now. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to find Mark and hit him. Jim, are you okay? Dave asked as he sat Dee down. I wanted to tell him what Dee had said, but I couldn't. Maybe I'm still too nice. It depends on what you mean by okay, I said. There were a few awkward laughs. Come on, it was a bad thing to do, but you and Linda won't break up over this, right? You're not going to divorce her? Dave asked. Why shouldn't I replied, my voice cold. Everyone at the table gasped. Why are you all shocked? I asked. We all agreed long ago that cheating is unforgivable. Once it happens, it's over. But Jim, it's Mark Lavaliere, Dee said. So what? I don't care who it is. If she's with someone else, it's done, I said angrily. I looked at Dave. What if Dee left with some guy for the night? Would you be okay with that? Dave's face turned red. He glanced at his wife, who was now staring at the floor. Jim, think about your kids. You love them and they need you. Think of them before you decide, Jane said. Her kids and mine were best friends. You mean like my wife is thinking about them now? I retorted. Well, that's why you got a babysitter, right? Dee tried to joke, but it didn't land well. Come on, Jim, it's just one night. She'll never get this chance again. You wouldn't divorce Linda over one night? Dee added. Why not? I glared at her. An uncomfortable silence followed. Jim, think of it this way, Jane said softly. If a famous model was here and wanted to dance with you and spend the night, wouldn't you be tempted? Could you honestly say no? Her pleading eyes were usually convincing, but not now. I stood up and looked at Jane. I might be tempted, but I'd say no, I said firmly. I have a wife, and I wouldn't want to hurt her. At least that's what I'd have done before tonight. Another heavy silence fell. I glanced around at my former friends, all siding with my unfaithful wife. I hoped never to see them again. A big bouncer walked up to our table. Is there a problem here, folks? He asked in a deep voice. Yes, there is, I said. I took out a $20 bill and placed it on the table. Don't worry, I'm leaving, I said, raising one hand. He nodded as I turned back to the others. That covers my tab. You can cover the bill for the woman I came with, too. Then I walked out of the club. Linda pulled me out of the alcove. She looked shocked. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. I couldn't believe the woman I married would even think of doing what I saw. Did I even know her? Had she done this before? You called me a slut, she cried. And you said you'd divorce me. Would you really do that over one night? I looked hard at her before answering. Yes, I would, I said. One and done. You know how I feel about cheating. We've talked about it enough. I can't believe you'd do this. But Jim, it's not real, she cried. It's just one outcome. Let's look at the others. Maybe something different happens. I looked at the other alcoves. Did I really want to see? No, but another part of me said I had to. We went through the other 7 alcoves. They were mostly the same, with minor changes. In almost every scenario, Linda left with that guy. In almost every one, we ended up divorced, our family broken, friendships ruined. Our parents were in pain, and our kids cried when they learned we couldn't live together anymore. I noticed in each scenario Lavalier approached Linda. She always went to dance with him. I always felt shocked and humiliated. Our so-called friends always acted like it was no big deal, but it was a big deal, at least to me. When we finished all 8 scenarios, we were both shaken. I looked at Linda, not recognizing who she was anymore. I couldn't believe she would publicly humiliate me. Linda must have seen my expression because she hugged me and cried on my shoulder. Please, Jim, believe me. I would never do something like that to you, she said through her tears. I feel like I don't know you, I said. Right now I feel the same about you, she replied. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Move forward, Adrestia said, coming up to us. What happens next is up to you. Each of you has a choice to make. Choose wisely. And Jim, to answer your question, no. Linda has never done anything like this before. That's one reason I gave you a warning. She turned to leave, and we followed her downstairs. Remember, the future is in your hands, she said, as she reached the front door. Dr. A, I said as she opened the door. What kind of gallery is this? It's a gallery of cheaters, she said, throughout the ages, men and women of all kinds, destined to spend eternity on these walls. You don't want to end up there, trust me. Do we still have a chance? Linda asked, still trembling. Yes, you do, Dr. A said. Your future is in your hands. For your sake and your kids, make it a good one. We will, I promise, she said. I hope so, Dr. A said with a thin smile. Have a good evening and come back after tomorrow night if you need. Thank you, I said, guiding Linda out. Dr. A closed the heavy door as we left. We got into the car and drove home in silence, each thinking about what we just saw. We picked up our kids and went home. It was late by then, so we put the kids to bed and tried to eat some leftover pizza. Neither of us was hungry. We were too tired and upset, so we went to bed and held each other. We just wanted to feel close. What we saw at the gallery really shook us. The next day, I just went through the motions. I got through the day, but my coworkers noticed I was distracted. What could I tell them? That I saw something terrible about our future? I went home, and we got ready for the evening, both scared about what might happen. The kids knew something was wrong, but we told them we were fine. We dropped them off and went to the hotel. After leaving our bags, we walked to the club, both scared about what was to come. We tried to act calm, but our friends noticed something was off. Dave took me aside. Are you two okay? He asked. You both look really nervous. What's going on? You wouldn't believe me if I told you, I said. Just try to relax and enjoy the evening, he said. I'm trying, I replied. Others also noticed, but we couldn't explain. I tried to ease the tension by telling Linda how nice she looked. You look amazing in that new dress, I whispered. You're the most beautiful woman here, as always. Oh, you, she said nervously. She leaned close to me. I could feel her shaking and knew she was as nervous as I was. You know how to cheer me up. We aren't great dancers, but we did it for fun and to enjoy each other's company. I danced with the love of my life, taking breaks for snacks and drinks. I went to get more wings, and when I came back, Dave was asking Linda to dance. I heard her answer and knew a big moment was coming soon. Her voice shook, and I knew she felt the same. I'd love to, Dave, but I want to make tonight special for Jim and me. I'm only dancing with him tonight, she said. I felt proud. I handed out the wings and whispered that we should leave. She promised a fun night later and put me off. Then it happened, just like at Dr. A's gallery. A few minutes later, the band took a break. In the quiet, we heard loud laughter from another table. We turned to look. Isn't that Mark Lavaliere? Phil asked, leaning to see. It is, Dee said excitedly. Mark Lavaliere was a star on our city's football team. He lived here year-round. He was known for being a good guy and doing lots of good in the community. Mark became the main topic of conversation. The guys talked about his football skills, and the women praised his kindness. He's also really handsome, Dee added. Linda and I knew who he was, but we were only interested in each other right then. We let the conversation wash over us, holding hands under the table. Hey, you two get a room? Dee teased. Linda and I looked at each other. We hadn't even been kissing, just feeding each other wings. We'd already gotten a room anyway. The band starting again saved us from more teasing. Want to dance here or go upstairs? I whispered to Linda. Before she could reply, Jane interrupted. Look, he's coming this way, she exclaimed. Sure enough, Lavaliere left his table and headed for ours. The women at our table got excited. 4 of them tried to look pretty, hoping he'd choose them. It was a bit embarrassing. If you think a woman can't show off while she's sitting, think again. Linda looked down and held my hand tighter. Hi, I'm Mark. Would you like to dance? He asked. He stood behind Linda's left shoulder, holding out his hand. For a moment, time seemed frozen. Then it happened. I saw the look on her face. I saw her reach out and take his big hand, starting to stand up. I knew I had to act. I stood quickly and spoke up. The lady is with me and her dance card is full, I said. Mark looked surprised, like I was a bug to be stepped on. Linda turned to me, shocked. I looked back at her. Isn't that right, dear? I asked firmly. Her face changed, like waking up from a dream. Her eyes grew wide as she looked at me. She quickly pulled her hand away from Mark like she had touched something hot. Mark looked surprised. My husband is right, she said to him. I'm flattered, but I promised him all my dances. I saw the doubt in his eyes as he thought about his choices. I knew he could beat me easily if it came to a fight. But I wasn't going to let him ruin our marriage. I was ready to protect my wife from him no matter what. Mark shook his head after a moment. All right, he said. He then asked the other girls at the table if they wanted to dance. I saw an opening and took it. They are taken too, I said firmly. Isn't that right, guys? I turned to the other men, hoping they would understand. One by one, they stood up with me. That's right, Dave said. The others nodded. The girls were surprised. It seemed like they were not used to their husbands standing up for them. Dee looked like she wanted to say something to Dave, but he gave her a look that made her stay quiet. Mark looked shocked. After a few moments, he gave up. He nodded, understanding it would not look good for him to push this any further. All right, he said, holding up his hands. I get it. No problem. Have a good night. We will, thank you, I said. To my surprise, he walked away. He headed to another table of women. Do you know who you just turned away? Dee asked, annoyed. Yes, Linda said. A troublemaker. Trust me, Jim did us all a big favor. How do you know that? Dee asked. You just met him. Trust us, Dee, I said. He's not someone you want around. I looked at my wife and saw love in her eyes. There was also pride. She closed her eyes and gave me a deep kiss. Want to dance, my love? I asked. She smiled and whispered in my ear. I'd rather be in bed with you, she whispered. I liked that idea. She grabbed my hand and told our friends, "We're heading to our room." She pulled me towards the restrooms. I waited outside while she went in. Dave came up to me. "What just happened?" he asked. "You wouldn't believe me," I said. "Does it have to do with Lavalier?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's just say he's not who people think he is." "Okay," he said. "Everything good with you and Linda?" "I think things will be better than ever," I said. "Go have fun. I'll talk to you later." "All right, Jim," he said, and went back to the table. The restroom door opened. Linda came out and handed me something. It was her panties. She had a mischievous smile. "I'm not wearing anything under this dress," she said. Happy, I took her arm and we left, waving to our friends. We shared a kiss in the elevator to our room. We got to our room and she was undressed before the door closed. Later we lay in bed, happy and close. Linda touched my face as she looked at me. "You're the bravest man I know, Jim Carlisle," she said. "You stood up to Mark even though he could have hurt you." "I think you're worth fighting for," I told her. "You would really have fought him over me?" she asked. "I was ready to," I said. "My hero," she said with a smile. "I love you so much, Jim Carlisle. Only you." "I love you too, Linda," I said. "You are my everything." We kissed again and made love one more time. We fell asleep holding each other tight. I knew everything would be okay. The next day we left the hotel and stopped at Dr. A's gallery. Adrestia opened the door before we could knock. "Come in," she said with a smile. "Did you have a good night?" "We did, thank you," I said. "Good," Dr. A said. "Follow me. I have something to show you." She led us to a room with a large painting. We saw a tall man wearing a fedora and a trench coat. "This is Max," Dr. A said. We shook hands and Adrestia stood next to the covered painting. "Thanks to you three, I need to add a new section to the gallery," she said. "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. She laughed. "I usually deal with revenge," she said. "Happy endings are rare here." "Well, you know the saying," Max said. "Living well is the best revenge." "Impressive knowledge, Max," Dr. A said with a smile. "We'll have to talk more about this sometime. First, I think our guests deserve to see their new picture." She lifted the cover, and we saw a photo of us in bed, covered, looking into each other's eyes. "What happened to the other picture?" Linda asked. "It changed," Dr. A said. "Do you like it?" "Yes," Linda and I said together. "So what happens to Lavalier?" I asked. "Don't worry about him," Adrestia said. "He'll get what's coming soon." She smiled and turned to Max. "Sweetheart, could you hang this in the new section?" she asked. "Of course, my love," he said with a smile. "Your wish is my command." As we watched, he took the picture and left the room. Adrestia turned back to us. She winked and spoke in an over-the-top voice. "The trick is to make them think they're in control," she told Linda, who smiled. "I'm really happy things worked out for you," she said after a moment. "You both chose well. Now go, live, love, and have a happy life. And remember, the doctor is watching." She pointed 2 fingers at her eyes, then at us. We got the message. "One last thing," she said as we went to the front door. "What's that?" Linda asked. "Congratulations," Adrestia said. "For what?" I asked. "You'll know soon enough," she said with a smile. Linda and I looked at each other confused. Adrestia closed the door, and we left, wondering what she meant. A few weeks later, I came home to find Linda waiting for me at the door. She was wearing a big smile. "I could get used to this," I said. "Where are the kids?" "They're staying with my parents for the night," she said. "I have good news for you." "What's that?" I asked. "You're going to be a daddy again," she said. I took her in my arms and kissed her. That was the best news I had heard in a long time. It must have happened at the hotel that night. "Really?" I asked. Was that what Adrestia meant when she congratulated us? How could she know? I pushed that thought aside and enjoyed the moment with my wife. Yes, things were going well. The next day I went to see Adrestia. I wanted to tell her the good news. But when I got to the address, I found an empty lot. I checked the address but was confused. Where did the house go? I looked around and saw an older man sitting in a rocking chair on his front porch. I walked over to him. "Excuse me, sir," I said. "What happened to the house on that lot?" He looked at me like I was crazy. then looked at the empty lot. "Son, that lot's been empty for a decade, ever since the old Barton place burned down," he said. I turned to look but saw no sign of a house or any buildings. Confused, I thanked the old man and drove home. A few weeks later, we saw a news story. Lavalliere had met his downfall. A very angry husband, a veteran with PTSD, went to Lavalliere's house. When Lavalliere opened the door, the man saw him and his wife there. Enraged, he pulled out a shotgun and shot Lavalliere in both knees and aimed a third shot at him. The shot missed mostly, but it was enough to end Lavalliere's ways for good. The police arrested the veteran, charging him with assault and attempted murder. He claimed if he wanted Lavalliere dead, he would be. Evidence of Lavalliere's past came out, and the jury felt sorry for the man. He was not guilty of attempted murder, but guilty of assault. The judge considered his PTSD and military service, giving him time served and probation. Lavalliere's reputation tanked after that. His football career was over, and he lost all his endorsements. He moved west and got a job as a sportscaster at a radio station in Fresno. Later, men whose marriages he had hurt sued him. We stopped worrying about Lavalliere and forgot about him. Life went on in our home. Linda and I were closer and more in love than ever. Her pregnancy was going well, and we joined Lamaze classes. Tommy and Emma were excited to have a sibling. Linda went into labor around noon on Thanksgiving while we were at her parents' house. Kristen Marie Carlisle was born at 5:30 in the evening, weighing 9 pounds, 8½ ounces. We all agreed she was our special Thanksgiving blessing. Linda beamed as the nurse handed her our newborn. On Christmas, Linda and I sat on the couch, watching Tommy and Emma open their gifts. Linda held Kristen, nursing her as the other kids played with their new toys. I looked at the tree with its blinking lights and shiny ornaments. One ornament, a round silver ball, caught my eye with a strange reflection. As I watched, two figures appeared. It was Adrestia and Max. They smiled, waved, and nodded. I started to wave back, but they vanished. A chill ran up my spine. Linda looked at me, worried. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said. "Everything is fine." "Good," she said. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I love you." "Merry Christmas to you," I said. "I love you too." We shared a kiss and then looked back at the kids playing with their new toys. I glanced at little Kirsten, snug in her mother's arms. As I watched, it dawned on me. Sure, February can be tough, but it doesn't have to be all bad. Hey, audience, if you liked this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.